want to take guns out of people's hands, come try it. And
it's basically a bureaucratic movement of paid shills. And I actually saw Gun Owners of America doing way more good. But it's like the NRA really exposed. You know, I mean, I used to be that way. I won't lie. It was like blind defense of Trump. It's like, but look, when that person that claims to stand for freedom, stand for liberty, is in fact doing the opposite. It is your moral obligation and duty to stand up and say, no, this is wrong. It doesn't mean you have to be against the candidate. It doesn't mean you have to be against the president. On this individual issue, you are. But that's why people are so, I would say, tunnel visioned. Because it's like, look, people will come up to me and say, well, I shouldn't say come up to me. It's like people ask me, it's like, do you support Trump? And my answer is, which policy? I'm like, well, total or not. It's like, it's not a zero-sum game. There's a lot of gray area. Give me a specific policy. Overall, I would support any president. I would support Biden if he did the right thing for the country. But unfortunately, he's not. So that's where we find ourselves back into. But before we get any further, to everybody listening, do us a favor, retweet the space. I want to introduce you to a good friend of mine, robnoerr, who he and I have, maybe being out of breath, I'm on the treadmill, sucking like a fat kid chasing a cupcake. Rob is very involved in politics. He's very articulate. He's a master debater. This guy knows his stuff. You should definitely give him a follow. He deserves a much bigger platform. This guy's intellectually honest. We don't agree on everything, and that's how it is for everybody. But Rob is definitely one of those guys that should get a larger following. He can do a lot of good for not just conservatism, but liberty and freedom. So let's go ahead and open it up. Rob, introduce yourself to everybody.
Yeah, thanks so much, John. Yeah, I'm robnoerr. I am a lifelong rural Pennsylvania resident. I consider myself a populist first and foremost, but also conservative. Ran for Congress here in Pennsylvania. And just my day job is I do home health care with people with autism and things like that. I consider myself just a regular person. I've known John for quite some time now. I was a fan of his even before I interacted with him. I think John's one of my favorite people because one of the things I hope that comes out through people that listen to spaces like this, with people like John and I, or maybe left-wing people and things like that, is I think it comes through how much fun people like John and I have, and not only when we're doing things online here, but also in our everyday lives. When you compare that to so many people that you see, particularly on the left, that seem absolutely miserable, you can't help but watch John's like YouTube videos, whether it be a Bob Ross video or any of the other stuff he's doing, without knowing that he's a guy that's having a blast, in addition to knowing what he's talking about. So I always have a great time working with John. So I hope that it comes across to everyone that people enjoy what we're talking about, maybe learn things, agree or disagree, but most of all, understand that, we're having a good time doing this, and this is why we do it. So thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Snake, get your hand up. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I was going to first say, Rob, that's awesome that you do work with autism. I have 2 children on the spectrum, and I'm actually, I was diagnosed with, what are they, now they call it, what is it called? Asperger's. After late in life, I was diagnosed with Asperger's. My wife was like, I think you should get tested too, because the kids are. So I went and got tested. And I'm Aspie, and I have 2 kids that are. So first of all, really awesome work that you're doing with that. Second of all, as far as the speaker thing goes, I thought it was really interesting what Thomas Massie, right after they went to that vote on Israel. And it was so cool. Like, even if I don't agree with every point that he made of why he voted no, it was so cool for him to give people his rationale and allow a debate to happen when there was no time allowed for the debate to happen prior to the vote. Jess was in our space with us. Jess is a badass chick who's got a pretty cool background in the military, and she was saying, like, what an awesome thing for him to do that and actually put up his reasoning and allow a discussion to happen of like why we don't want to overtly get involved. Like, my view on Israel is I am pro-Israel. I am all about it. I think they have a right to defend themselves. But I think that if we send money to them, then we act like the mafia, and we think that we can dictate how they make their decisions, and how they can do what they feel is best for their own country. So I'm against giving them money because I feel like what happens is the American government then uses that as leverage to politically influence decisions that they make, and they should be able to do the things that are right for them. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because I just think that Massie was awesome for saying his reasoning for no, and then explaining it, so that you could at least have a discussion on it, or maybe think a different way, or challenge yourself.
As soon as he did that, because Massie is forced to do this because Massie, he's one of the very few outside of Ron and Rand Paul, Justin Amish, that I truly respect as devout constitutionalists. These guys aren't just sitting there saying that I'm a libertarian for some kind of political purity test. They actually back their statements. And Massey's vote, I was like, I'm glad he explained that. Because if he doesn't, he leaves himself open politically to the likes of the Dranos and the rest of these people coming out there and attacking him and saying this guy's a rhino. Massey goes out there, lays out a plan, and educates the people. That's what I feel a good representative should do. Be clear and concise on your stances and why you're voting for or against. This is why Massey is very popular, and this is also why the MAGA movement truly hates this guy. He's not going to be a blinded follower, and I can respect that about him. Rob, let's get into it. The new speaker, where do you stand? Was this a win or was it not?
I think it was a win in some senses. In other sense, I think we've stayed pat. Look, at the end of the day, let's say you're a MAGA person, which in a sense I am. I'm more of an anti-establishment person. If that means Ron DeSantis is the best chance to bring down the establishment, great. If it's Donald Trump, great. If it's Viva, whoever, it doesn't matter, right? So I'm not looking at it through the cult of personality of just MAGA or not, Trump or not. I challenge anyone to tell me that's a Trump supporter or a MAGA person or shares my beliefs, who they think could have been Speaker of the House that would have made real policy differences and actually done something different. I can't, who would it have been? Jim Jordan? Well, Jim Jordan's been leading the committee on, weaponization of the government. What real policies have we got from that? Still funding them, still funding the FBI, no subpoenas of the Bidens or anything like that. So I don't think that Jim Jordan would have been this panacea that all of a sudden things would have went well. I don't think that the current guy that they put in is going to, Mike Johnson. I don't think that Steve Scalise would have. Is there a chance that it could have been people that were worse? Possibly. To me, though, it was more about the reason that I approve of what Gates did was it was the symbolism of showing the people that are populist that the Republican Party isn't working for them, and it's not going to work for them unless you hold their feet to the fire. And so it didn't really matter to me that Gates didn't have a plan in the sense that, well, here's the one person that we'll put in that'll make change. To me, what Gates is representing is we are in the disruptor phase of things. We have to show the biggest threat to people that want to end the weaponization of the government, that want to end the uniparty, is the establishment Republican Party. Because unless the people in your own side actually have your interest at heart, they're the biggest impediment to getting your interest put forward. And so to me, that's what this represented. When you saw the pettiness, when you saw the, all of a sudden Republicans that couldn't raise their ire when lockdowns were coming on, didn't get angry and pound the gavel when, we had the debacle we had with Americans being killed in Afghanistan, or the border crisis, or fentanyl, or the fact that people can't pay their rents or their mortgages. They couldn't get upset about that. But oh boy, they had to stay a couple extra days, and they were embarrassed by their friends at the New York Times and CNN mocking them because they couldn't pick a leader. That, to me, hopefully showed the American people that's what the Republican Party is about. They're about their own interests. They're about, achieving their own ends for power and things like that. And they only really get upset when that's challenged. So that's how I view it in a nutshell. Oh, and I could keep talking if you like. So now,
no, I'm sorry about that.
No,
I was gonna say Snake. Snake, go ahead. Well, hold on, Rob. We're gonna do hands up. We're gonna do hands up. So for anybody that wants to speak, just make sure you put your hand up. I'll bring up the speaker. Rob, continue.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, John said he's on the treadmill. I'm taking the opposite. I'm always streaming on video. So now that I'm not on video, I'm just sitting around eating donuts in my underwear here. So I can understand if John's actually needs a second because he's doing constructive stuff. But no, that's in general my feelings on it. I'm interested to hear what other people have, because there is valid criticism to say, but before you take such a disruptor phase, you need to have some sort of plan going forward, because one thing that's true, as bad as things are, things could always get worse. And you don't want to make that mistake of saying, well, just blow up everything. Obviously, I mean figuratively blow up, like, get rid of all of the, the way we govern because it can't get any worse. That's not true. So I do think that there's valid criticism on the other side. And one thing I'll say just as a precursor to this conversation, because John and I are going to disagree on stuff, you should never fully agree with someone. If you're a free-thinking person, you will never find another person that completely agrees with you, and you'll never find a political party that completely agrees with you, and then that's perfectly okay. I think that the whole Trump-DeSantis debacle with all of these influencers online is, damn, do people have thin skin. Like it's so outrageous to me. It's like, if you're a Trump person, how dare DeSantis' team pick on Trump? And it's like, well, Trump's team's picked on DeSantis the whole time. So, it's okay to have disagreements. It's okay, to understand that things aren't going to be perfect, that there's no perfect solution, but still come together at the end. As far as I'm concerned, once the primary is done, whoever wins the Republican primary, barring, something insane happening like it being Mitt Romney, I'm going to support. So I hope that this spaces could illustrate that we could disagree on this, hopefully, quite viscerally, and still come to a constructive point at the end.
I'm going to go ahead and respond to that, then we'll go to Snake. I agree with Rob partially here. I think Matt Gaetz is someone that had a vendetta against McCarthy for the ethics probe. He didn't want to squish it. McCarthy was already working a deal with the Democrats that actually favored what Gaetz wanted, but it got blown out of the water. I'm not a McCarthy fan. We all know McCarthy is just another Trump loyalist. He's another rhino that's wanting to support this war in Ukraine. But here's the problem. Gaetz went in there and he threw a wrench into the machine. Now, Rob calls him a disruptor. I agree. But Gaetz, I also feel, has personal reasoning to do this. He's eyeing a gubernatorial run in Florida, I think in 26. Gaetz wants to be the man that toppled the biggest supposed rhino, which we could probably call him that. I think rhino has been a term that's been grossly abused by both sides. It's lost all meaning and definition. But I feel like with Gaetz, this was for personal reason. It was for personal clout. Because here's the deal, and this is my point. The evil you know. We knew McCarthy. I'm not the biggest supporter of his, but we knew him. Now, you have no plan. You've not united the GOP. Rob talks about symbolism. I agree. The symbolism is the GOP is so grossly divided right now. We had how many rounds of voting, and we couldn't fully agree on anybody. Now, Johnson, I really feel like the likes of Drano and the rest of them are really chalking this up as some major victory. A lot of people know nothing about this guy, but being that he's supposedly a Trump supporter, that automatically makes him good. I disagree with this. We can look at Johnson's first act as Speaker. What does he do? He gets up there and he mirrors the likes of McCarthy. It's a McCarthy 2.0. Is this a win? Well, we'll have yet to see, but he's pretty much McCarthy light. That's what I'm seeing right now. So I kind of feel like if Gaetz really cared about getting somebody up there that was going to squish these omnibus bills from the subcommittees and stuff like that, negotiate or talk to your constituency base. But instead, again, I will say that, yeah, he's up against a very strong opponent, which is the establishment GOP, if you will. But at the same token, that really blows my mind. Who endorsed McCarthy? That was Trump. So I feel like there's so many factions of the GOP, and this is why we're so not united right now. But here's the deal. I'll give Johnson a chance. I hope he does well. I'm not impressed with his first act or his first thing of saying more money to Israel. That's not an American first policy. Don't get me wrong. I understand that we should support our allies. Israel is one of our biggest allies. But there's the idea of supporting them politically. We can sit there and say, look, they have every right to defend themselves, but we should not be getting ourselves involved. I do not want to send young men and American men and women to go fight and die for Israel. I do not agree with that. So, like I said, jury's still out for me, but some of the stuff I've been seeing from Johnson already, I'm skeptical, as everybody should be. Everybody should be skeptical. Nobody should believe any politician blindly to simply say, like, look, he's going to do this. He's going to do this. To me, it's just saying actions, not words. And until you produce those actions, I'm skeptical. So that's where I stand. Snake, over to you.
Yeah, so I agree a lot with what you said, John, but I also agree with Rob. So it's kind of a weird thing. So this guy, I don't think he was any great change. I don't think that here's my thing. I have to constantly challenge myself to not automatically assume because it's coming from MAGA that it's wrong, right? So I have to look at who Matt Gaetz is and. Did he, and I go, man, he's got this personal war with McCarthy, and all he does is, slurp Trump, so he's automatically wrong. And that may not be the case. He may have actually had good intentions with this. And because he knows McCarthy works against people and tries to push his own agenda, he didn't feel like he was the right person. Some of his own personal, attitude and issues may have clouded that. But at the same time, maybe he was trying to do the right thing. And then you see him push for what was this last guy that they had up before Johnson? He was he was at that point willing to take just about anybody, even if it was somebody even worse than McCarthy. And it made me go, man, what are we doing here? What did they lose out of going with this guy Johnson? Can they no longer have a single person challenge him, and like what they had with McCarthy, where you can just boot him if he's not doing his job? Did they give that up? Like, what power did they lose to even put this guy in? So there's so many variables here to unwrap. And the bottom line, I think that what we need to do is get rid of. It's like Rob said, the whole idea of being an ideologue on any sense. Like, I'm a hardcore Christian, but I disagree with seeing like guys pray together on the floor of the house. The Bible says, do your giving and your praying in secret, where and then we got guys out there doing it, and then that allows them to be labeled as something, as a theocracy. Or you got MAGA guys up here who are so loyal to Trump that like every word that comes out of their mouth has to be questioned, because they're more concerned with making sure that Trump is happy than really anybody else. But the MAGA base is also so willing to go along with anything Trump says that nobody pushes Trump when he's wrong on things. So that's why I love, like, Thomas Macy. Like, nobody can really pin him down. You want to call him a rhino, you want to call him a libertarian, you want to say that he's a conservative or he's a gun nut, but you can't really pin him down because he's really just a constitutionalist. And that's what the Republican Party should stand for and be, is constitutionalists first. Let that be the argument in every sense and at every time, and stop trying to make this an ideologue conversation, or a conversation of, let's just burn it all down and start over from scratch. Like, no, we don't have to do that. We can just go back to what worked, which was the fucking Constitution. And let the Republicans be that party that supports those ideas and defends them well, and articulates their message. So if he does those things, then great. But I really think that we just ended up like the same place, because honestly, his job is to whip votes and to fundraise. And if he's not good at those two things, he's not going to be good at his job. So we're just going to have to wait and see what he can do.
Well, to me, like, I think there is this idea that there is something greater than just returning to constitutional principles that is something that's affecting us right now. No, not really, because if you actually understand the Constitution, what I'm about to say certainly is entailed within it. But to me, the idea that we have a corrupt system that no longer represents the will of the voters is the biggest threat to our country and therefore our Constitution. And so I think there is reasonable debate. The reason I like Thomas Massie, and if you go to my Twitter file or Twitter threads, I went back and forth with Massie about a year ago when he signed this budget. I thought it was a terrible move. I thought the idea that he was like spinning it as, oh, but we'll have votes coming up in the future. I was like, yeah, but you know how it is. They'll just pass a continuing resolution and then there'll be another omnibus, et cetera, et cetera. But those are disagreements that actual people that are good faith are having, right? You could make a good faith argument as to why Thomas Massie and me disagreed. That's perfectly fine. Massie is a free thinker. Rand Paul is a free thinker. People like this are going to get the ire of all sides because they're not going to totally follow one side. And that's good. Those are the people I like, because at least, even if I have disagreements, I know these people stand for something and they're actually thinking through their principles. So I completely agree with that about Massie. For me, the reason this whole debacle comes down is basically Ukraine funding. And it's just the most evident example of this. What's going on is we have an accusation by people like Matt Gaetz, which I agree with, which is that our elected leaders don't care about the people of this country. They don't care about people in John's district. They don't care about people in my district. There are massive problems, whether you're Republican, Democrat, black, white, Christian, atheist, Muslim, massive problems that are going on in this country that are affecting just about everyone. But they don't care about that as much as they care about funding places like Ukraine, which then helps their donors and helps their family and things like that through kickbacks and things like that. So what Matt Gaetz really, the most important thing other than the January 6 tapes, which we can talk about that if people want, was that he wanted to go back to each committee putting a bill out. And that's the one thing that McCarthy was unwilling to do, and Johnson's not going to do it, and Jim Jordan wouldn't do it. And the reason is because the bulk of the representatives in Washington, both Republican and Democrat, understand by having these huge omnibus bills, it allows them to put pork in it, which means that it benefits them and their district in ways that they want their lobbyists. They're not going to give up that fight. And Johnson's not going to do it, and Jordan's not going to do it. And so for me, Matt Gaetz was drawing a line in the sand and saying, listen, McCarthy, you said you would go back to ending these omnibus and continuing resolutions. You failed. You're out. And I'm sure if Gaetz was here, he would say, yeah, Maybe Johnson will do the same thing. But the lesson needs to be every time we're lied to by a Republican Speaker of the House, they should be removed. Make the Republicans come out and make your Republican that represents you come out and say, yes, I am for sending this money to Israel. I am for sending this money to Ukraine. And then let's see what happens in the primary. But that's what the establishment Republican Party wants to avoid. They want to come to you and say, but John, don't you think it's important that mothers get milk for their kids? Therefore, we had to pass this bill because it's all one bill that funded the FBI and funded gender studies in Afghanistan and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So to me, that line in the sand is a good line to draw because it is representative that our elected leaders no longer care about us. They care about this massive budget and massive government that they're able to then shield themselves from their own voters going, well, what was I supposed to do? I had to vote for it.
I agree with Rob on this one, but I want to see that. So a lesson isn't learned unless it's repeated. So if Johnson doesn't come through on this, like Matt Gaetz, like you said, drew a line in the sand for McCarthy, if Gaetz doesn't get up there and come after Johnson, and I'll just say the same amount, how long was McCarthy speaker for? Like a few months, right? Not long. So if Gaetz is going to give him the same time period and Johnson doesn't come through on the same promises and Gaetz remains silent, then it's been proven. This was not about actually representing his voter base. This was a Gaetz attention declaration. That's just where I stand on that one. Dan, you've had your hand up. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I agree with both of you on different points. My thing with Gaetz pulling what he did is if he had the purest of intentions, he wouldn't have turned around and fundraised off of it. That's where I look at that. But as far as speaker goes, only time will tell. I'm not impressed, but if you want to know how a representative truly is, put him in the driver's seat and you'll see whether they're good or bad. Now, with Gaetz endorsing Emmer, I grew up in Minnesota. I grew up not too far from his district. I am skeptical about any elected member of Minnesota saying they're Republican. I grew up in that area. They may vote Republican, but they are very weak Republicans in that area. But, I mean, we'll have to see what happens, and I hope we don't get burnt in the end.
Yeah, like you said, time will tell. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm just going to go by what I'm seeing so far. And like I said, his first act up there, it's like, okay. And something else I wanted to point out was that when he talked about getting the money to Israel, did you notice the entire House chamber? All of them stood and applauded. That right there is a massive tell. That's who's against you. That's who's for sending your money overseas. That's for someone that basically we are teetering on the brink of war on two different theaters now. All it takes is one slippery little step, and now we're involved again. That's what honestly worries me about America. That's what worries me about these politicians, because I'm telling you right now, it will not be their sons and daughters. It will be yours. And that's the problem that we face. And then, of course, you've got the libertarians out there virtue signaling, they're purity testing, we shouldn't be doing anything. Israel's just as bad as Hamas, yada, yada, yada. And it's like we have this massive conundrum where there's just so much gray area and nothing is black and white anymore. But I think as long as we fall back to the Constitution and we follow it, we can't go wrong. But I find it very interesting how so many people out there will conflate saying, I support Israel's right to self-defense with, oh, now you're just a Zionist. And it's gotten to the point where it's like the same as saying rhino or the swamp. It's lost all sense of the word, all sense of the meaning. And it's come to the point where you look at these people saying this, it's like, do you even know what you're talking about? Because I really don't think you do. So for me and my stance, America needs to vocally support Israel. She is one of our strongest allies. From military technology to information gathering from Mossad, they're one of the top tier organizations out there that do this in the Middle East. People don't realize that. They feed us so much intel. And of course, you're always going to go back to the, what about the USS Liberty? And it's like, look, how long ago was that? They said they thought it was an Egyptian ship, but forget that point. If you're going to hold grudges, then you better hold grudges against Japan for Pearl Harbor. You better hold grudges against America for what we did in Iraq and Afghanistan. I was like, I want to see consistency in their logic, and it never shows. It's basically just saying, I'm an anti-Semite, here's my dog whistle. And I'm not trying to sit there and say that anyone that does not agree with Israel is an anti-Semite. But when you're using these different catchphrases and examples that you clearly don't know fully about, it kind of proves the point that you're just stupid.
Yeah, I don't disagree. One thing that I think I would like to bring up when it comes to sort of U.S. interventionism, the idea of when we should send money or send troops when it comes to conflicts around the world, there's a compelling case to be made about the safety and the consistency of a unipolar world. So in other words, if you have one country, as the United States has been since the since the end of World War II, which is basically the strongest country in the world with both hard power, i.e. their military technology, and soft power, which is their economic and cultural influence in the world, that's been the United States. And arguably, and I would agree with, that makes a more stable world. The problem I have now saying, well, if it's true that the U.S. should have intervened in conflicts in, say, the 60s or the 70s, shouldn't it also be true of today? Shouldn't we be intervening on who we think is the side of the just in Israel-Palestine? The problem is not the people of this country, not the soldiers of this country, all of whom I love and think are the greatest people and the greatest country that's ever existed. I'm talking about the leadership. I'm talking about the people at our intel agencies that are weaponizing those agencies to treat people that vote against the party they like as terrorists. I'm talking about the intel agencies that lied to us about Libya, Iraq, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Syria, and continue to lie to us about geopolitical situations around the world. They have lost competency and credibility to be the actors that should be involved in these situations at this point. In other words, even if you could make a case, well, at some point, some strong country needs to go in and intervene on the behalf of, choose your side, Israel or Palestine, I don't think that the United States leadership in our intel communities have the moral authority to do so anymore because they've lied to us and made the situation worse in so many places. Israel can handle themselves when it comes to fighting Hamas. You might not like what they do. That's a different conversation. As an American citizen, I want my country to care about me and other American citizens, regardless of their look, of their religion, of their gender, of their sexual orientation. That's what our government's supposed to do. Instead, they continue to meddle in foreign affairs, which they say is important, which almost always backfires and makes things worse, which they then use as justification for why we need to meddle in the future. That's why I'm against and aghast that the Republican Party leadership is so vehement about sending money, sending resources to places like Ukraine and Israel. It's just going to blow up in our face. It's going to harm, like John said, it's not going to be their kids fighting in a war. It's going to be your kids. It's going to be average middle income people's kids. It's going to be your gas prices that go through the war. They're always asking the average person to make more sacrifices that the leadership never has to make themselves. And that's why I'm against this. And I'm nonplussed that that's the first thing Johnson said. Of course, Jordan would have said the same thing. He might have said it in a different way, but at the end of the day, whoever that Speaker of the House is just a figurehead position, and they're going to bend the knee to what the establishment Republican Party says. Because even if they're against that, they know that there is such a large swath of people in that establishment Republican caucus, they can't, just like they can't throw all the MAGA people out, the establishment people, the MAGA people can't at this point throw all of those people out because the party's fractured. So that's a line in the sand that they're going to keep sending that money. Guarantee it.
Gator, we got you, and then we'll go over to Dan. Go ahead, Gator.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having this space. I think it's a very important conversation. I have all the hope with Mike Johnson that I can possibly have. I mean, he has voted against Ukraine funding consistently, but that's going to be the true line in the sand. Israel is a totally different situation. I don't think we should be sending them money either, because they can take care of their own business. But it's high time that this whole quagmire in Ukraine gets wound down, and people should literally be scratching their head every time they see, Ukraine wanting to do a ceasefire and Biden and the establishment want to continue it. Why? I know why. And I think other people need to start reading and understanding why. We can't keep poking the bear of nuclear powers all over the world. Eventually, it's going to blow up in the face of every single one of us. And thank you, John. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, everybody, because you guys are awake. You understand everything that's going on. If somebody if somebody's main talking points are, oh, we can walk and chew gum at the same time, and all this stupid nonsense as the reason why we should keep sending our children's future to a country 5,000 miles away, we've lost the plot. And we've got to put our foot down. And if Mike Johnson doesn't, the whole reason why this thing went through in the first place was supposedly about line item funding for Ukraine. If we lose on this issue, all of this has been all for naught, in my opinion. And I've literally got a headache this morning for praying for our country. And everybody, please, I beg you, regardless of who you may pray to, what you may believe in, but we need it more now than ever because we have totally lost the plot and we're losing direction. But thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well put. I'd seen that the members on the House floor were kneeling in prayer and instantly were attacked by the left. No surprise there. Talking about this is what Republicans want. They want a theocracy. It's like, no, one can say that it is your God-given right to pray and to worship to whomever that you see fit or not to. If you want to do it in the House, that is fine. When it comes to legislation, that's where I take issue. That's where we should have a separation of church and state. I've argued this point for years, and it's not a sense, and I'm a Christian, I believe in Christ, but it's not a sense of attacking Christianity. Instead, it's defending and protecting it, as well as every other religion out there, because we've seen, as of late, the likes of Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, we're seeing more representation of Hamas supporters in Congress. So let's say the church and state is similar. Let's say that the Ten Commandments are now ruled out, and they start passing, let's say, the tenets of Islam, legislation's rooted in that. What's to stop them? There must be a separation. I think our forefathers understood that, and again, to go back to your original point, I take no issue if Ilhan Omar wanted to bust out her rug and pray to Allah. I take no issue with that. That is the freedom of religion. That is your free speech. That's what you represent. But when it goes through the pipeline of religious legislation, I take issue with that. And I haven't really seen a lot of it, thankfully, but it doesn't mean it won't come to pass. Because as we've seen, and I think more and more people are waking up to what the true cause or the true reason behind, let's just call it Islam's zealotry, if you will, you'll see their overall goal is to reestablish the caliphate, which they claimed they did years ago, and to essentially spread Islam across the entire world. This is nothing that has been made secret. It's out there for everybody to see. So I feel like when people turn a blind eye to these things because they're afraid of being labeled Islamophobes, I feel like they're being intellectually dishonest. You have to accept things for what they genuinely are. That's where I stand on that. Dan, over to you, sir.
Hey, John. Yeah, you're right on that. I 100% agree with you. And you're talking about with people calling for war and everything like that and who's going to go to war. It ain't going to be me. I've already done my time. I will not deploy again. I won't be sitting on a ship doing whatever I do. It'll be someone else doing it. It will not be me. Even if they wanted to call me back, I can't go back in because I got Cat 3 med. So while I support Israel, and I wholeheartedly support them, I think they should do whatever they have to do to protect their country. I cannot in good faith call for war on something that I won't be able to go do and be able to stand up for that because of that. So it would be completely dishonest to be like, okay, yeah, I support Israel, and on top of I support Israel and the right to defend themselves, let's go wreck shop in the Middle East again. But, I mean, I don't see why, and I see there are people doing that, and we will probably get some more out of the House as things go on, and who knows where we'll go, but I just can't support that nonsense. And they talk about the USS Liberty trying to use that as a let's be against Israel. Are we against Britain? I mean, I'll go even back further than you did, John. Are we against Britain? Look what Britain did to us. We have made peace and forgiven Britain, Japan, Germany for things they did. So Israel saying we screwed up. I can't find fault with that. But anyway, thanks for having me on. I got to go get some stuff done. It was great talking with you guys.
Thank you so much, Dan. Yeah, I mean, first, there's something I think that's important that needs to be said here. First off, nothing is absolute. There's always exceptions to the rules. But as someone who didn't serve, first, thank you very much to anyone who served in any capacity whatsoever. You have done something that I was not willing to do. I did not make the choice to do. And that should always, no matter if we agree or disagree politically, be something that should be celebrated by everyone. That there were people, I don't care if you did it because you wanted the GI Bill to help yourself financially. The people that signed up knowing that that could mean putting their life on the line, I think are truly people that need to be celebrated even if we disagree. Now, there is no absolute on all people that serve think this. Obviously, that's stupid. We're not lefties. We don't talk in absolutes like that. But does anyone else find it interesting that the majority of people that did see active combat are those that seem to be ringing the warning bells of why it might not be a good idea to jump headlong into war? Isn't that funny? The people that were there, the people that went through it, the people that to this day, I guarantee if we ask Dan, I know what John will say, if they had to pick up arms again because they really thought it was necessary to protect their loved ones in this country, would do so without hesitation. They're the people that seem to be most vocally against jumping in. It's a bunch of keyboard warriors that will never go over there that are out of shape, which, don't get me wrong, that would be partially me, but they aren't going to be the ones that have to sacrifice. Oh, there's no sacrifice, though, they're unwilling for people like John to make, or for young people today in poorer communities that they know will be largely sent over there. They are more than willing to say that those people should be sacrificed. It's very funny. I find it similar to, do you ever notice you'll hear all these lefties talk about how great communism is, and then you actually talk to people that lived in communist countries like Cuba or the old Soviet Union, and they're like, no, you don't want that. And yet these people that will never have to suffer through that, they claim to know better. So I think that's funny to, not funny is not the right word. It's very heartening to hear someone like Dan talk about how he proudly served and how he fought and how that gives him apprehension to understand that it's a very serious thing. I think that so many people think life's a video game, and they, you see it with the Ukraine conflict. It's disgusting. You could go on and see people on all sides of that conflict on places like Twitter that are posting videos like, haha, look, a grenade got dropped on that guy, he died. It's heartbreaking. Even if you don't like Russia, you don't like Ukraine, those are real people dying with real families. And we treat it like it's just this abstract thing. It's like, yeah, push a button, bomb them all. I think it's grotesque. And I think that we need to wake up, particularly in this country, to understand that if we continue to approach things that way, we may find ourselves in a conflict where it won't be fake. It will be felt back home, and it will be your loved ones that are the recipients of those things.
Fully agree, Rob. Fully agree. I have seen a lot of my guys that I served with, specifically in the Afghanistan theater, coming out vocally against all of these wars. Because it's not so much that it's the atrocity that war brings. We're all aware of that. This is nothing new. I mean, if you've seen YouTube, you've seen Google, you're on Telegram, you see the footage. You see the carnage that is associated with war. That's why I've always been a firm believer now that war must be the very last choice made. Diplomacy at all costs, if we can. And if not, and this is where a lot of people and I disagree, I take the Patton method approach. If it has to be war, the goal is to kill more of them than yours. That's why I firmly believe Israel should be allowed to conduct whatever type of operations they have to. I'm sorry, I don't agree with the innocent deaths of people, but that is what is in the parameters of war. Hamas drew the line in the sand, they brought it on themselves. I fully agree with you. I fully agree that too many people want to send other people's sons and daughters to go fight for something they personally believe in, but yet they won't personally pick up arms and go support. We saw this massively with Ukraine. Ukraine kicks off, and everybody is out there changing their bio flags. It's like, look, Poland's open. Romania's open. Go enlist and go fight. Because I'll tell you this right now. You think Iraq and Afghanistan were bad. Look at armor on armor warfare. We had that in the initial invasion of Iraq, but you're talking about T-55s, T-72s versus M1 Abrams. The technology dominated the battlefield. They didn't stand a chance against us. But the thing that, and I want to go back to Rob's point, is that it's always something. Politicians create some type of international problem. We saw it with McCarthyism. We saw it with the Big Red Scare that led to us losing over 50,000 good men and women in Vietnam. Ultimately, for Vietnam to get invaded and turn communist. But still, was it a necessity? No, it wasn't. We saw the same thing with the global war on terrorism. Where are these weapons of mass destruction? Do I think that America should have got involved in that? Absolutely not. But again, there is so much behind the scenes stuff at play here that we have no clue about. But it's a continuation of, like I've said always, politicians create the problem and then they posture as if they themselves are the solution to said problem. And those calling for war, like you said, they won't be the ones to go and fight. So I agree with you. Snake, you had your hand up, sir.
Yeah, so I'm kind of repeating myself here, but I do want to reiterate 2 points here. So first, like people have a problem with the Ukraine thing and Israel thing, and I believe in morally supporting Israel, but not financially, because it's like I said, I think that it lends us to believing that we can control how that war is fought for them, and we don't have a right to do that. As far as the Ukraine thing, I feel like the same thing could have been done in Ukraine, where it's a moral support. Okay, we could provide you weapons, but sending you endless amounts of money is why this war is continuing, because it's financing something else outside of the war. It's financing companies and bureaucrats and all these other people who just want to continue to get paid. And so the pace of the war has greatly slowed down into a quagmire when it could have been over one way or the other very quickly had everybody just gone all in on it like they should have. And now that's, probably not going to happen, and it's going to take years for this to resolve. So, but my main issue that I want to bring up on that, and then I'll go back to the House stuff, is everybody sees things through the lens of their political party, and that needs to stop, because the left stopped being a party of anti-war when Obama became president. They slowly transitioned to being more war hawkish, and by the time Trump came in, they had fully gone over to being, wanting to be involved in these foreign conflicts, so much so that the only area that they didn't hit Trump on was this area where he was getting us involved in foreign conflicts, which everybody wants to completely disregard. And not talk about all the things that we did when he was the president in all these other countries. So my issue is that now that Biden is in, and please do not ever for 1 minute think that I am any kind of liberal or defending Biden, but now that Biden is in, everybody's acting like it's the end of the world that we're involved in Ukraine, and nobody stood up and said anything for Yemen or Syria or there was no pressure to actually leave Afghanistan or have Trump keep all of those promises. And that's what bothers me, is that everybody is now like, oh my God, we're losing all this money. We're doing all these things that are just so horrible. And it's like, we did that for 4 years under Trump and nobody did or said anything. Like, we created a humanitarian crisis in Yemen and nobody gives a shit about it. Like, there's still people there that like have nowhere to live. They're starved. Everybody talks about, blowback. That's where you're going to get blowback. These people are going to look at us when they grow up. These kids are going to look at us and blame America. So we've just created a whole nother quagmire for ourselves down the road when they come and they want to blow something up here. But nobody said anything about that when it was happening. Now that it's Ukraine, it's like, oh, how we can't get involved in these proxy wars and we're broke. We were broke then. Like, we were on the way to getting broke. And nobody cared because there was a Republican president in. So everybody needs to just be more level-headed and serious about the things that they care about all the time, and start calling these people out and getting them to actually, all the time. Like, I don't care if DeSantis wins. If he turns into a war hawk on me, I'm going to be on his ass and going freaking nuts. And I am a DeSantis guy. So I don't want any part of that. And I don't want to get in there and start going playing that game. So anyway, there's that point. But then the other thing I was going to say is back to the House thing and praying in the House. Like I said, I went to Liberty University. I have a degree in theology and a bachelor's in religion. I'm a hardcore Christian. I totally 100% disagree with Christians out in public having a prayer meeting on the House floor. So did Jesus. It's a part of the Bible. I think that prayer should be necessary. I think everybody should pray if you're a Christian. It's a part of being a Christian. But I think when you do it out in public, you are asking for judgment and condemnation. Jesus knew it and spoke about it in Matthew, where you do not do that. You do not give in public. You do not pray in public, because you look like a hypocrite and you're going to get called a hypocrite. And that's exactly what we're seeing happening with these guys saying, hey, look at these dudes. They want to create a theocracy. And then they got up there. They had the chick who introduced Johnson yesterday and talked about like how we need to be a Christian nation. And then Johnson got up there and talked about how we need to be a Christian nation. And when you do things like that, you're speaking to a base instead of speaking honestly. And then you go out and pray and do all these other things. And I think that it ruins the message. And that's why I want to bring it back again. We need to be based in the whole idea of inalienable rights is a Judeo-Christian belief in itself. We don't have to defend it for anything other than that. And you can still be a constitutionalist and protect your religion. And I think that's the way we should be going through. So anyway.
I actually have to disagree with you on this one, Snake. I get the premise. Cool. I get the premise of what you're saying. I partially do agree. But if we look at the historical examples that Jesus showed, if we talk about praying in private, so as not to draw attention to yourself as, say, virtue signal in a sense, but also on the House floor, it's always opened by a prayer. I mean, that's been in the history of the Congress since its foundation, I believe. The idea of praying openly, Christ did it. He laid hands. We have churches. I grew up Pentecostal. It was a public show of faith. Now, I don't necessarily agree with it anymore.
So let me interrupt you right there. So let me just read you this. Okay, Matthew 6:5-8. When you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by men. But when you pray, go into your room, close your door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. That is a Christian belief, okay? Jesus actually
I agree with you
there. Jesus didn't pray over anybody. If you actually read, he just said, you're healed. Bam, done. He said, what you asked for is done. Bam. Just talking to Jesus.
But what about when Jesus was in the synagogue and read the Torah and then said, this day the scripture is fulfilled?
Yes.
Jesus, I get what you're saying. I think you're arguing semantics here.
No, I'm not. So, like, the only time that you see Jesus pray is actually when they was in the Garden of Gethsemane before he died, before he was crucified. He went off to pray by himself.
But Snake, let me stop you right there then. Now you're arguing deity. When God inhabited the body of Christ, that was God in flesh. The reason you just listed Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane is when he sweated tears of blood, he was no longer God, he was man. Therefore, the sacrifice was made as a literal man, son of God. So your examples of Jesus didn't pray, he didn't have to. That was God. Why would God pray to himself?
Because he's still speaking to the Father. They had a relationship, and he was
giving you an example.
He prayed from the cross. He said, "Father, take this from me." He prayed it in Gethsemane. So just
again, he
God,
was human in those conditions, though. I see what you're saying, but to me,
he was fully human and fully God. But he still told us what Jesus does is different than what he told us, and what he told us is to not pray in public. And it's just because you're going to get called a hypocrite.
Well, I mean, here's the deal. I don't think that we should ever curb our faith just because we're going to get blowback for it. I think that's exactly the opposite reason behind it. I understand your point here, but I also feel like Jesus didn't speak in definitive, in a sense of like, I think that scripture you quoted, I've read it, is more of a, don't be out there posturing. Don't go out there posturing to the people as if you're some type of holy man. If you are genuine and sincere, you don't have to make it public. So I kind of see both ways there.
It can still go into a room. Like there are private places, and there's nothing wrong with saying, "Hey, I've been praying for this country," or "Hey, I love this country, and I feel like that God has blessed this country." I don't mind those kinds of things. I'm not saying that those are bad things. I'm not saying with proclaiming your Christianity is a bad thing. I don't think that any of that thing is bad. But what I'm specifically talking about is what caused the theocracy comment, which is saying, hey, look at the Speaker of the House bending down on one knee with a bunch of dudes in the middle of the House floor. Instead of going into a private room and praying, is exactly what Jesus was saying, that if you do that, you're showing yourself, you're like, look at me, I'm holy. Look at me, I'm righteous. And it becomes to others, it looks self-righteous. And it ruins the message, is all I'm trying to say. Do you understand?
I totally disagree with that because of this right here. That's the same way we've gotten into a lot of predicament we're in. When people said, Jesus said you couldn't judge, and then they mean to say, oh, that means you can't tell people you're wrong. If you look at that passage of scripture, he was talking about the Sarces and Pharisees. That's what he was talking about. He was talking about their behavior. No, it was not. It was clearly he was.
I'm going to mute everybody real quick. Look, we can continue this debate. Let's go hands up, please. Let's not. I apologize, Snake. I was talking over you. I shouldn't have done that. Let's take it back over to Jamal and you can take it from there. Let's go hands up, and once your point is finished, I'll call on the next man. Go ahead, Jamal.
Yes, sir, First Sarge. Okay, he was clearly talking about the Pharisees and Sadducees. If you look at what has happened today, especially among Christians, they allow sinners to tell them you can't judge because they took that one scripture when Jesus Christ was God Almighty said you can't judge, and then they tried to apply that where people can't tell people who's right and wrong when clearly it's talking about making yourself the standard instead of making the holy scriptures. If I'm doing something wrong and you come up to me and you say, "Hey, you're wrong. You're not supposed to be publicly intoxicated," and I say, "Oh, you can't judge me." No, that's not what it meant. And the same thing go with prayer. We have been praying as a nation and stuff like this for years, and so many times we say we need to go back to the way things were. Well, we go back to the way things were, put men back where men, women, and have men being proud of being Americans. That's the things we did. We did pray. We did have open prayer. We can't separate from one area and then try to apply it to this new stuff. We have to, if we want to go back the way things were, we have to do it the way we did it before. And we were a proud Christian nation. How many times have we shared this picture of the Empire State Building glowing with a cross on Easter? We did that. We did that. So we had public displays of our faith. Now, do we supposed to rule by? No, but it do supposed to guide us. And I don't want to take too long for Sarge, but that's what I'm saying. We don't supposed to rule by, but we supposed to make it guide. And what Mike Johnson did yesterday, he just let it known be guided. He is not trying to establish Sharia type crap like that. No, he's not.
Very well put. Okay, Snake, over to you, sir.
Okay, so I feel like you're making a bunch of arguments that are defending a bunch of arguments that I'm not making, Jamal. So first of all, let me address the Sadducees and the Pharisees and you know what I'm saying. So with that, he used them as examples of what not to do. Okay, and what they did was go out in street corners and pray, and he was saying don't act like them. He's not saying don't pray. And I'm not saying don't pray. I'm saying be careful about how you present yourself as a Christian. That's what I'm trying to say. And when you do it publicly like that, it's like I have no problem with when they have the prayer breakfasts. This used to be a huge thing where you have the presidential prayer breakfast. I have no issue with that. I have no issue with if you go over to somebody's house and there you invite somebody to your house and they're not Christian, I still pray. I still pray over my food. I bless my food. But if I go over to their house and they pray and they're Islamic or there's something like that, I'll bow my head or whatever, but I'm not participating in their prayer. So I think that you could do it in the right way, and I have no problem with that. I'm saying that it's different. Having a prayer before, like opening the house or going back to those sorts of things are fine. But when you're having an actual reverential discussion with God and you're asking for things, I think doing it in a public fashion out on the bottom floor of the house is very different. And I think that it leads to people making claims of theocracy, etc. That's all I'm trying to say. And I think that it can be looked at in a way. What I'm trying to get away from is these ideologues who want to play up to these different ideas. I just think that it could be a negative thing. I'm not saying that you can't pray. I'm not saying that Christians shouldn't pray. I'm not saying that they shouldn't pray or they can't have, like I said, there's lots of different ways to do this. But the way that it was done, I actually do have a problem with Islam. If some of these Islamic people went down to the bottom of the house floor, put their carpet there, and then started praying towards the east. Yes, I would have a problem with that. I disagree with that. So that's what I'm trying to say.
If I could jump in here real quick,
Go ahead.
Let me just
real quick, Rob, real quick. Hey, I need to take a shower. Rob, you're taking over hosting. I'll be right back.
Okay, sounds good. So I would be what I consider myself to be a very bad Christian. I believe Jesus is the Son of God.
Same.
I believe in the message of Christianity, but I don't consider myself to be a biblical scholar or anything like that. My understanding of the passages being discussed, I'm sort of agreeing with Jamal. I think that what's being said there is the problem with the Pharisees and such was that they were only for show doing these prayers and everything, but they weren't living their lives based on the religion that they claimed to be expounding. In other words, they're putting on a show. And in that sense, I agree, Snake, that if we have politicians, it's very similar to this. When I ran for Congress, I would have a lot of people that I was running against that would say like, well, I'm pro Second Amendment. And I'd be like, oh, what's that mean? Well, they didn't know. They just knew that bumper plate slogan. They couldn't tell you what policies they would push for or what the importance of the Second. They just knew that's what they were supposed to say. There are certainly people that use Christianity like that, particularly politicians, that will say, well, I know my constituents that vote for me are overwhelmingly Christian, so even though I don't live my life in what would be considered a Christian lifestyle and like have humility to God and to Jesus and to pray every day in my personal life, I'll make a show of it in public. That way it will benefit me personally. Clearly that is unacceptable and is something that if you are a serious Christian, you should be offended by, because if someone, be hot or cold, but be lukewarm and I spat you from my mouth, right? If you don't want to be Christian, then fine, don't be Christian. That doesn't mean that some Christian couldn't vote for you if they think that your policies being pushed forth go along with their worldview. But if you're pretending, just pandering for votes, to me, that would be even worse. And by the way, that would be true of any ideology or philosophical beliefs. If you're going to pretend, that's even worse than just saying, no, I disagree. So I get that side of it. However, I will say this. I feel that with leftism, that actually is a religion that's actually far more damaging than probably even Islam, because the religion of leftism and sort of progressivism and what I would call cultural Marxism that says that the whole world could be broke into the category of oppressor versus oppressed, that religion is rampant through almost all areas of culture in this country. And it is a religion. It is a cult or a religion. That's what it is. We see this happen all the time with the left. For example, I could show you images after the George Floyd thing of all of these Democrats kneeling with these African cloths on. By the way, the irony was many of the cloths they're wearing, if you looked into the history of them, were from black nations that owned slaves. They played fealty to that. They kneeled, they bowed their heads to that. Their lip service that they provide all the time is in service of this sort of woke religion, whatever you want to call it, cultural Marxism, progressivism, or whatever. And I do think that as someone who doesn't consider myself a strong Christian and who also believes that if you are a good person and you follow the moral code that I adhere to and you get there through Islam or you get there through Judaism or atheism or whatever your particular creed may be, I have no problem with you. I'm not trying to enforce my belief set on you. But I think that it's high time that we realize as a country that getting away from the values that Christianity is really about has made this country a worse place. And there needs to be a return to these values. That doesn't mean that our government should be issuing policies that say you have to be Christian, policies such as that. But the moral underpinnings of this country need to be founded on something. There is no vacuum. There is no, the moral underpinnings are some sort of secularism. No, those people on the left, ask them where they get their morality from. They too are engaged in a religion. And so if I have to pick, and you do have to pick, then I will choose those Christian underpinnings for what our morality should be. We have serious conversation in this country as to whether or not we should be teaching sexuality to children, whether or not there is a biological difference to men and women. These are all a resort of losing our sense of morality. And I'm sick and tired of playing defense. I'm sick and tired of because a Republican gets down and kneels and prays. Fine, maybe that's something that good faith people like you, Snake, I'm willing to listen to criticism, and I certainly am. I give no reason to believe you seem like an entirely a fantastic patriot. And again, we can have disagreements, but I won't take this criticism from the left. I will not take criticism for people that seek to put a playbook on us that uses lawfare, that uses weaponization of government, that uses cultures and cancel culture and things like that to silence us and say we can't have a religion, that then themselves shove their religion down your throat. I'm not going to listen to them say, oh, we have a problem with religion on the floor of Congress. BS. Those people, that's all they do. We just want to be left alone. They want to shove their religion down our throats 24/7. So I welcome your criticism of this. Ultimately, I don't think what Mike Johnson did was a big deal. I do agree with you that sometimes people do things, politicians, like pray for public show, and only they and God knows what's in their heart, if they're doing it for show or if it's because they're actually seriously praying about the decisions they'll make as leaders, and God will judge them for that. But I'm not taking this as a serious event, particularly when it's lefties that are screaming the loudest about it, that have no problem when their religion's being shoved down our throat every day. Let's see. I've never hosted a space, so anyone who has speaking permissions right now, Jamal, Snake, go ahead if you guys wanted to jump in. If not, I can go to the other part that Snake talked about that I think is worth talking about, which is this idea of during the Trump administration that there were conflicts and things like that. That's certainly true. And it's something that I have mass criticism of Trump. For example, the time that I think Trump supporters, and I say Trump supporter, I am and was a Trump supporter. It's just I'm not a cultist. I'll call him out when I think he deserves to be called out, which was many, many times. To me, one of the worst days of his presidency was the bombing of Syria. I think that those sort of conflicts getting us involved in were the exact reasons that, I was a Ron Paul person in the first place, where someone that talked about the dangers of getting into military conflicts around the world like that. And so I thought it was striking that that was the first time I could recall in Trump's presidency where you could turn on Fox News and they were like, yay, Trump did a good thing. And then you switched over to CNN and MSNBC and they were like, finally, Trump's being presidential. Sure, now that we're bombing people, in Asia, now finally, that's a presidential action. I thought it was one of the low points in his presidency. That was before embracing lockdowns and things like that. But, I do think there's a difference. I agree with the criticisms of Yemen. I really do. I think that's fundamentally different than the situations we're seeing with Ukraine, though. And I think that if you're honest, even if you dislike Trump, if you're just trying to be an objective observer, the world was less at conflict when Trump was president than when Biden was president or when Obama was president. And I think a lot of that has to do with two things. One, it is the signaling of strength that people actually thought that Trump was maybe a little unhinged and might use more military interventionism. And that's a philosophy I believe in, the walk softly but carry a big stick, or sort of the inverse of that. Let people be afraid of you, but be hesitant to go to these wars, because that projection of power will stop conflict in the first place. It's why open carrying's so effective. If people see that you are dangerous and armed, they're less likely to make you use that weapon, whereas if you're unarmed, then they may attack you, which would mean you're more likely to engage in a violent conflict. So I do think that about Trump. I agree with Snake that there should be criticism of people that claim to now be anti-interventionism, but would have been okay with anything Trump did along that. That's certainly true. I'll give you another example. The idea of so many Tea Party people that's big issue was massive government spending that all of a sudden became Trump supporters who massively spent. And their rationale was, but Trump's spending on good things. No, if you're a principled person, those principles should exist regardless of who is in a position of power. You shouldn't sell out your own well-being, your own principles, just because the guy you voted for is in office and say, well, it's different now. You shouldn't do that. I agree with that. But again, as I said, there was a fundamental difference. I think that the idea that Trump, what he stood for and represented, and the reason that he was attacked by the deep state, the establishment, the intelligence agencies, whatever you want to call it. When Chuck Schumer famously said on Rachel Maddow's show, after Trump won the election, before he was sworn in, though, that he shouldn't criticize the FBI because they'd find 6 ways from Sunday of coming back at him. The reason that Trump was criticizing the FBI and the intel agencies at that time was for our position on Syria, because he was arguing that if it's true that Islamic terrorism is this big threat that we need to deal with, then why are we fighting Assad and Russia in Syria? Why aren't we working with them to get rid of ISIS and al-Nusra and al-Qaeda? And this is a great point. That's exactly how I believe. I'm no pacifist, although I might criticize our military interventionism. Certainly there's a time and a place for when we should be aggressive, and there are terrorist scumbags that deserve to be eliminated, hopefully as precisely as possible. Don't get me wrong. But the fact that Trump spoke up like that and made him a target of our intel agencies, to me, exhibits what the real problem is. And I sort of look at the real problem as the inverse of you, Snake, although it is worth criticizing people on our own side, and we absolutely should always do that. The real problem is us people don't have any power culturally. When you look at the anti-Vietnam movement, for example, the anti-war movements, even under George Bush, the reason that there was much effectiveness there was all of what we consider sort of counterculture, or people that were voices for young people and cultural voices that could push back on establishment voices, all seem to be going the same direction against those establishment voices. So the entertainment industry, young people in academia, people in the mainstream media, all of these people had large swaths that were anti-Vietnam War, that were anti-George Bush's interventionism. However, what happened after George W. Bush in Iraq was amazing. In 2 presidencies, the most effective and powerful cultural influential anti-war voices were completely co-opted from being the most anti-war people to the most pro-war people. And the reason was because Barack Obama basically just continued the policies of George W. Bush, and Donald Trump, for all of his faults that Snake points out, and the fact that he actually was interventionist in many areas, he paid lip service to not being intervention. And Donald Trump to them represents the greatest evil. He is everything that the cultural Marxist hates. He's white, he's rich, he's supposedly Christian, he's male. All of these things are oppressors. He is the comic book caricature of everything that the progressive left hates. And so because Obama was a cool guy and was for the wars, and Trump supposedly was against them, and he's the most evil person ever, the very people when I was in college, I'm 39, so when I marched against the Iraq war, the very people on the left that marched with me, my friends, are now calling me insane because I'm not pro-war. My position hasn't changed. I've continued to be anti-intervention, but not them. They were more influential than me because they had all the Hollywood celebrities and all the, people that were in the music industry and everything that were on their side. Now what we see is the counterculture has become the culture. You used to rage against the machine. Now you rage for the machine. And the evil, the people that are considered the establishment, the people that are considered the great, horrible people that are making the decisions are Trump supporters, are conservatives, are Christians, are white males. Those are the people. Most of these people, by the way, are just people like me and you. If you happen to be black and Muslim or gay or whatever, I assure you, the people that your ire is being directed at by the people that are trying to gaslight you, they don't give a shit that actually most of these people are just normal Americans like you. They need someone that they could demonize. So it's not just about demonizing Trump. It's about demonizing middle America that they could put their finger on. And so that's how and this applies in almost every issue. That's how you have corporations that engage in basically slave labor in places like China, like Nike, that are just putting Black Lives Matter up on their website, and all of a sudden their businesses aren't being burnt down. But black homeowners in inner city Philly, yeah, their homes are getting burnt. Their businesses are being burnt. And then people like me and you are called racist when I stand up and say, wait, I don't want black communities burnt. I don't want businesses chased out of their communities. I think this is a huge mistake. This is being done by people with a political agenda that don't care about these communities. So for me, that's the difference I see. I see that. I think you're absolutely right to criticize.
Rob,
Go ahead, Snake.
I was just going to say, I was listening this whole time. I'm sorry. When you called on me and my hand was up, I was saying goodbye to my wife. She was
I'm so sorry. I was sort of filling time there waiting for someone to, so go ahead, please.
Yeah, I couldn't actually say anything. And no, you're hitting all the points, and I appreciate you agreeing and where you disagree with me as well. I want this to be a Christian nation. I want it to go back to being a Christian nation. So I don't want anybody to misunderstand, because I think that, going down the bottom of the House floor and praying is a bad look. It means that I don't want this to be a Christian nation, or I think that we should be, all my point is that if you do that, then you are inviting Islamic people and Sikhs and Hindus and everybody else the opportunity to go down and pray on the floor, and to include their prayers, etc., instead of just basically saying, hey, we're a Christian nation, we are founded on Judeo-Christian principles, and then operating that way. Because ultimately, how you operate is how people view you. It isn't what you say. It's not how you bloviate. It's not your actions as far as your prayers or your giving or bragging about praying or giving. It's how you operate. It's how if you're out there acting like Jesus and doing your best to at least act like Jesus, that is what influences people. I mean, that's what the Bible says, is that people should ask you why you have hope. They should come to you and be like, man, why are you so hopeful? Why are you so happy? Where is this joy coming from? It should be in your actions, not in your platitudes or or just going down and praying in front of everybody, that kind of thing. That's all I'm trying to say here, is that And then it also invites other people in to think that they can do the same things. And when we're trying to be a Christian nation, I don't think that's the right thing to do. So that's all I was trying to say with that. And I know that people got fired up, and I understand that the idea of wanting to be a Judeo-Christian nation, and that's where our founders, that is where the whole idea of inalienable rights comes from. You're not going to get it from any other religion. It doesn't exist outside of Jesus, outside of the God of the Bible, whether you're Jewish or not, or a Christian. That's who established these ideas that we have inalienable rights. So I don't want anybody to think that I was going against that. But yes, as far as the whole other part, everything you were saying about be consistent is all I'm asking people to do. So if you're having a problem with Ukraine, you should have had a problem with the things Trump did. If you're having you have no problem with Ukraine, but you used to be a anti-war person, be consistent. That's all I'm asking for across the board. People have things change, positions change, new things come up, but don't just listen to an ideology or a single human being and kowtow to them so completely that you have no ethical base to stand on anything, right? That's my big concern. Anyway, I feel like One by Land's had his hand up forever, and John probably wants to get in here after a shower as well, so I'll shut up now.
You're good, brother. I agree with you. I think it's just a different interpretation of doctrine, but I don't think either side is inherently wrong. It's just how you view things on that. Is this something that has got a massive rift between? No, it's not. I understand your point. I don't think anybody was interpreting you incorrectly. I think most people would just say, you know what, you have every right to believe it as you do. As long as you don't force it on others, then we are in agreement. So, yeah, to each their own. But yeah, One by had his hand up. Go ahead, sir.
Good morning. Thank you, John. So, Snake Eyes and I were in Gene Church's space this morning, and a couple of Magadonians came up, and they weren't gaslighters. They were reasonable men. They were behaved, unlike many other spaces we've been in, where the attacks are relentless. But their dialogue was just factually inaccurate, and we were chomping at the bit. Snake did have a good opportunity to refute the issue of Trump and the supposed accomplishment of starting no wars. Rob, you probably recall the 2016 debates when Trump attacked Jeb Bush for his brother's handling of the Middle East. And Trump went on and did much worse. Really, because when you consider what Bush dealt with initially, there were a lot of unknowns. But Obama exacerbated the problem. Trump came in and bombs away. And for the Macedonians to deny that this happened. In fact, Hamas attacked Israel in 2018 when Bush was president. People somehow forget these things. I don't know why. But to the religious points that were being discussed, I cut Snake. I cut Mike Johnson a little slack because, as Rob eloquently described, the left has pushed the envelope so far left that any show or display, as long as it's not sustained in the way you described, I'm okay with. Our founders were not all practicing Christians. But our documents are based on philosophers that slightly preceded them. Some lived during their time, John Locke, Montesquieu. If you take the time to read these people and how they even were discussed peripherally in the Federalist Papers, guys like Madison and Franklin emphasize that this republic will not exist. The Constitution can't sustain itself unless we have a moral founding. And that's based in our Judeo-Christian values. And Sharia is antithetical to the Constitution. And that's an uncomfortable thing for many people. But the reality is, we have to beat back the woke culture because it is literally tearing us apart, and it's tearing our founding apart. Land it there.
Thank you for that. Jamal, go ahead.
Okay, I'll be honest. I am a Trump supporter, not a worshiper, and there are two different things. A lot of times people confuse Trump supporters as cultists because some of us don't recognize if you're talking to a fellow conservative and he has a disagreement with you, he's not attacking you like the left. So too many times, and I love Donald Trump. I ain't gonna lie, I do love him. Too many times we do act like, oh, you're just as evil as Nancy Pelosi, you're just as evil as Harry Reid, and we shouldn't. We should take the time to listen to what you're saying and say, okay, well, I don't agree, but respect you. Now, you said the 2018, which did happen, but the death and carnage of what happened in 2018 is nowhere similar to what happened earlier this month with the Hamas butchers. That's no way different. And myself as a Trump supporter, I say, wow, why is he constantly trying to bring, like you're trying to say that it's equal? That well, Donald Trump let something like this happen on his watch, which it didn't. But if you say, hey, these things did happen, that's 100% true. You did have an attack in 2018. I will admit that, but the impact, the barbaricism that Hamas did was nowhere even close. When it comes to bombing, because I remember I was speaking at many of those Moab rallies when President Trump dropped the mother of all bombs. He dropped it in Afghanistan. Yes, he did drop bombs. Yes, he did. But there was, to me, and maybe you can explain it better, and I don't mind saying I don't understand what you're saying. When you say he started new wars, to me, he didn't, and I will say why. Because we didn't put no boots, we didn't have servicemen except in Nigeria. I believe it was in Nigeria. We had special forces. That's when the congresswoman, a black woman who looked like she from the Gap band, and if anybody knows anything about 80s music, she looked like she from a member from the Gap band with the cowboy hat, tried to set President Trump up with the widower who was special forces. That's like we had something there, but I just, am I seeing something from your point of view? I just don't see the wars when people say like what we have now, what President Obama did. I don't see it. And if I'm wrong, I'm man enough to admit that, hey, I'm wrong. And from a Trump supporter point of view, so you will know, so you're like, oh God, these guys just crazy. They don't want to listen. Nobody should be that. I listen to First Sarge. I listen to the Savage, American Savage every day. I don't miss him on Rumble. Why? Because that keeps me in check to let me know I'm not worshiping Trump. If I can't sit there and listen to a full show of John and his heterosexual life partner, Josh, if I can't listen to that because I'm mad because he said something that he disagreed with, and I get mad and stump off, then that means I done turned my support to President Trump into worshiping him. And that's not acceptable, and that's wrong. And if anybody does that, and I'm one of the biggest Trump supporters you can get, if anybody does that to you, they're wrong, and you should check them immediately. And that's all I got to say.
Snake,
Real quick, hold on real quick, gentlemen. We're going hands up. Let me first respond to Jamal. Jamal, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I used to be, as you describe, a cultist, a diehard cultist, until I was exposed to the works of Milton Friedman, John Locke, and started having way more in-depth discussions and readings of the Constitution and what it stood for. And then I started to realize and understand that we do not have to assume political identities of the people that we are supporting. I see this with Trump. I see this with DeSantis. That's why I say, like, I will support DeSantis. I will vote for DeSantis. But even today, and I'm going to talk about this tomorrow on the next space with Rob, there is a thing that DeSantis is doing. I don't know the specifics of it, but essentially it's government basically not regulating, but highlighting businesses that are anti-Israel. I take issue with this because I feel like, well, I'm not going to get into depth. That will be tomorrow's discussion. But real quick, I see you have your hands up. We have a new speaker. This is April. Let's go ahead and give it to her. Then we'll go to Snake and then one by. April, go ahead.
Hey guys, so I don't normally speak in spaces this early, so I'm getting my coffee in, and hopefully this will all make sense because I'm kind of newly awake. But here's what I will say as an independent who used to side with the Democrats. And the reason why I used to side with the Democrats is because they painted the narrative of what conservative people were. And I bought into that narrative because I actually really have been conservative for a very long time, even though I kind of like am a newly declared conservative. And so what I will say, like being from someone who has been on the other side, is your principles, just go for it. Like, don't shy away from them. Yes, you guys, a lot of people that are conservative are religious. I'm not specifically religious. I am kind of a strict constitutionalist, so it's kind of freedom of religion. And I think as long as it kind of stays with those confines, like, you know, like being open to Muslim people and being open to whatever. But if you're very Christian, I think you should go for it. If you are conservative for certain reasons, I think that people should kind of be like more vocal about it and be proud of it. Because when you're not, the other side paints a narrative about you. And I find that to be really harmful to the cause.
Yeah, I think that's great. I wanted to say real quick, too, about Jamal. I think Jamal has made this the only space I've ever heard to bring up the Gap Band. So for that, I think this has already been an overwhelming success. April, I completely agree with you. I think that one of the things that happens is because there is a vocal minority that is so influential in our culture, it allows them to shape narratives. You see this happen all the time, and this is a combination of people that run sort of our legacy mainstream media or academia, the entertainment industry. So, for example, we could see how people January 6th, regardless of what you think of that riot and what happened there, that's been deemed an insurrection. That's in the lexicon. That is something that for the foreseeable future and probably throughout all history will be terms that are synonymous. January 6th, insurrection. However, when you see violent lefties like Palestinian Hamas supporters that overwhelmed Congress the other day, even some of them getting violent with police, that's not considered as such. It is considered stopping an official proceeding if some MAGA grandma walked politely through the velvet ropes on January 6th holding a United States flag. But when Representative Bowman pulls a fire alarm to stop an official proceeding, well, that's considered just someone that didn't know that a fire alarm wasn't going to open a door. What we need to do is actually stick by our principles and don't worry. At the end of the day, regardless if you're religious or if you're not, what really matters is you yourself know if you're a good person. You know if you're living up to your principles, and maybe your loved ones, your wife, your husband, your children, your extended family. That's what's most important in life. We're all going to die at the end of the day. Those are the things that will really matter. And so we need to stop worrying about allowing the other side to paint us as, oh, well, you're anti-Palestinian if you have this, belief on what we should do with the Israel situation. Or if you're against Black Lives Matter, that's because you're racist and you hate black people. These accusations are nonsense. Ask yourself this: are you a racist? If you know you're not, then dispense with it and laugh at it as it deserves to be. And once you no longer give that power, once people on the left, for example, you talk about you've been a conservative but just weren't out with it. Look at communities. Obviously, everyone's an individual. I get that. But we can draw to look at like differences between men and women or people in the white community, black community, etc., and see overwhelmingly or on average where people stand. The Hispanic community and the black community are far more socially conservative than the white community. And yet those communities have been gaslighted to believe that conservatives or Republicans or white conservatives, etc., are racist, that all want to keep them in shackles. It couldn't be further from the truth. It really could not. Most conservatives I know, people like John, other people on these sort of spaces that I've interacted with, we judge you as an individual. That's it. I don't care how you look. I don't care who you're attracted to. I don't care about any of that. I care if you're a decent person, if you share an agenda with me on sort of what morality is and the direction our country should be going. I care about your actions. Those are the things I care about. And yet the left and the Democratic Party wants to treat you as just a monolithic member of a community and pander to you and gaslight. So I think, April, you're an excellent example, and you're saying exactly what needs to be said, that just stick to your convictions. You know if you're a good person, and stop allowing this narrative to be shaped by people that don't care about you, and they actually don't care about the communities they're pretending. They don't want crime solved in the inner city. They don't want people that are illegal immigrants to actually have good, successful lives in their own country. Because once that happens, they lose their power to divide us, and they'll lose their political power. Let's see. John may have dipped out for a second. So I see we have a new speaker. So why would you like to go ahead and unmute why I'm back here? And go ahead and let us know what you have to say.
Hi, Rob. Thank you so much for that. Wow. I could not agree with you more. It just brought to mind right after the last election and the way the Democrats attacked conservatives as racist. Most of us shut up. We were afraid to speak for being called racist. We didn't want to say who we were voting for. We were silenced for any belief. It's like they just came out from nowhere and accused us of everything under the sun. And the whole atmosphere changed. I remember walking in supermarkets where you could genuinely just talk to anyone. Hey, how are you? And there was a silence, there was a thickness in the air. And I learned so much from that. It took a minute. I'll be honest, Rob, I was silenced for a while. I was afraid to speak up and share my beliefs of what someone else would think of me, but no more. I will never be silent again for my beliefs because, like you said, I know my heart. I know what I believe in, and I'm not afraid to stay true to my moral beliefs out of fear anymore. And I appreciate everything you said, and I couldn't agree more with you. And thank you.
Thank you so much. And one of the things I say a lot, and we'll see if John agrees with this, we talk a lot about hypocrisy.
I don't. I'll just say I don't, Rob.
John, disagree. I talk a lot about hypocrisy of things we see on the left, and you could talk about the utility of whether or not that does any good or not. But what I always say is when you see an example of, for example, a Democratic politician or a lefty that's on has a big following or something like that, or even people on the right that engage in blatant hypocrisy, what that does, it says two things. It says, one, they didn't care about the issue that they're claiming. So let's take a simple issue. Kids in cages. Remember when that was considered a human rights abuse? So it was all Trump's fault. Kids are in cages. It's evil. It's horrible. And then Biden gets in office and there's 4 times more kids in cages. And they're like, well, those kids are different. So I guess screw those kids. They deserve the cages, right? So what's that say about kids in cages? Well, yes, it shows that the Democrats never cared about it. They just used it as an issue for power. They pretended to care about it. But it also, this is the part that no one realizes, and why they're just said illustrates this. They also know that moral people do care. You see, John and me and everyone else here listening, we don't want kids to suffer. We don't want even kids of illegal immigrants to be in cages. We don't want that. We understand that it's a difficult problem, that there's no good answer to, and that there might be things that could be done better, but it doesn't mean you're evil or malicious if, because of a court decision in the most liberal district, the 7th or the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals, ruled that you can't detain children with their parents when they come to the border. But we can't then allow everyone to come through, so a difficult decision needs to be made. See, when they call you racist, what Y just said there, they know that you care about that. I don't want people to think I'm racist. Y doesn't want them. John doesn't want. Snake doesn't want them. No one does. We take that because we don't like racist. And so we don't want to be accused of that. They don't care. The people accusing you, they don't care. They don't care about actual race. Like, for example, they'll call you a Nazi because you vote for DeSantis or you vote for Trump. Then they'll cheer actual Nazis that get put in front of Parliament in Canada or that are in the Azov battalion in Ukraine. They'll say, well, those Nazis are different. See, they never really cared about Nazis, but they know you did. They know that you find Nazis to be disgusting. And that's why that attack works against people like us. Because we don't want to be considered evil people. We don't want to be lumped in with people that are disgusting, racist, bigots, things like that. And so they don't care about it, but they know you do. And what you have to realize at the end of the day is you in your heart know if that criticism is valid or not. And if it's not, understand that 99.9% of the people levying that criticism at you, they don't care if you're a Nazi or not. They don't care if you're racist or not. They're just saying it because it helps them be politically expedient, and they wouldn't care if you're a Nazi or racist anyways if you were on their side. So stop taking those accusations seriously and laugh at them. That's my advice about it. Let's go to one if by land, two if by sea. I see you had as a speaker. If you'd like to go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, I would like to readdress Jamal. Jamal, you misrepresented what I said. You have to concede that the Trump talking point is the world was at peace. No one started anything when Trump was president. That is a Trump talking point. And when I brought up the 2018 Hamas attack, that is part of refuting that claim. Now, in no way did I ever suggest in this space or any other space that that's equivalent of what happened 3 weeks ago. That simply is untrue. Further, Trump admittedly started no wars personally, but he continued prior conflicts. He promised to get us out of Afghanistan. He left it to a complete incompetent boob, and our military paid a severe price, not only in 13 lives, but in severe brain injuries of many military personnel. That's Trump. That's on Trump. Trump hired Mark Milley. And he had an opportunity to fire him, but he didn't because he's a coward. Trump hired a straight up racist in CQ Brown who believes that 42% of the military pilots should be minority. That's straight up racism. Trump allowed Milley and Brown and others to infuse wokeism in our military. Further, Trump let Syria fester, and he continued his own intervention when he promised to get our personnel out, and they're still there for no real apparent good reason, considering the way the region is on fire. So to say that the world is at peace because of Trump is a lie. It's at best disingenuous. I'll land it there.
I'm sorry about that. There was a weird connection issue. I also want to bring up the fact of the withdrawal of Afghanistan as promised by Donald Trump. I think this is one of those things to where it's the dichotomy is the people versus the government. Donald Trump did not withdraw from Afghanistan. The drawdown was in the process. It was an elongated process. He negotiated a ceasefire with the Taliban, which I take no issue with. You have to negotiate with your enemy. It's not one of those that we're just going to kill them all, let Allah sort them out. That's a fool's way of thinking. Is if you can negotiate with your enemy, if you can come to a ceasefire agreement for whatever reason, that should be the priority, and then the negotiations begin. We saw this in Korea. Years this went on back and forth to the diplomacy table, because as long as we can keep people to the table discussing and debating, that keeps people from dying, innocent people from dying. So the idea that Donald Trump was supposed to end the war in Afghanistan, no, he used that as a re-election campaign bid. There's a reason he didn't withdraw from Afghanistan. He had 4 years to do it. He didn't. This is one of those things that Donald Trump knew with his advisors that, look, this is a wonderful campaign strategy for a re-election bid. It's like, let's use this. But at the same time, I really feel like if anybody actually put boots on the ground over there, whether it be Iraq or Afghanistan, every single one of us knew these countries are going to fall. We've made this discussion very public several times that people hopefully are starting to understand that Iraq and Afghanistan are complete examples of tribalism over nationality. You're not going to have Iraqi or Afghanistan nationalism. It's loyalty to tribe. It's religion dominates everything. I've discussed this in great length. So every single one of us that was over there knew that the moment that we withdraw, this is going to be a Saigon 2.0. Jamal's old enough, I'm pretty sure that he knows exactly what I'm referring to, that we knew as soon as U.S. forces go, Taliban will creep back in and set back up. So when Trump said, I've destroyed ISIS, no, he didn't. He did some damage to him. He put him on the run for certain. I'm not going to knock the guy for that. I'm glad he dropped that Moab. Absolutely. You massacre them as much as you can, because these people will do the same to us. But this idea that Trump was supposed to end the war, that never happened. And that was a campaign promise that I really was upset about, that we kept troops over there. But again, at the same time, I don't think anybody's withdrawal plan would have gone perfectly. I will blame Biden and his generals. It wasn't just on them. There was a lot of yes men in that chain of command that let that whole thing fall through. Unfortunately, that's what you get when you surround yourself with ass kissers. They're going to give you the yes, the up and down, the north and south versus the east and west. And that's a problem that I think Trump has. Trump has a history of people that will pledge fealty to him that were once his most proponent oppositions, in opposition to what he'd go out there and say. He would bring them into his inner circle, or at least give them a pass when it's like, look, man, I understand that somebody can come out against me and they can say the most abhorrent things about me. And then they'll come back and say, you know what? I was wrong. I'm sorry. I apologize. And I will accept that. I will forgive you. But you will never be in my inner circle of trust. It just doesn't work that way. Trump has a history of doing this. We saw this with the weaponization of the FBI. We saw that it was proven the Obama administration had spied on him. It was proven. What did Trump do? He appoints Wray. He empowers the FBI. He grows it. So it's just one of those things like, I have to go by the actions and not the words. And the actions are not aligning with the words. And that's what I take sincere issue with. That's what Trump has a history of doing. Now, do I think DeSantis can be any better? Look, I'm not going to sit there and be like a lot of DeSantis supporters will and say, like, yes, he's going to do this. I feel like, no, the actions have to be proven in time. I'm willing to give him the chance. But I will not sit there and position myself and this idea that I have to take on DeSantis' identity and say, yes, he's going to do it. Why? He told me so. No, the proof is in the action. Let's wait and see if it actually comes to fruition. With Trump, I think he did some really good things. I will not deprive the man of that. I love the fact that he did away with the Federal Protections Employee Act. That needed to happen. But I just feel like right now DeSantis is probably a better man to get the job done. I don't agree with some of the things DeSantis has said. It's a lot of things cause for concern. But like I said, there is not going to be, or excuse me, like how Rob said, there is not going to be any political purity test that any politician is going to fly with passing colors, whether it be a twig and, or excuse me, a splinter or toothpick in my eye. Maybe I'm seeing something wrong, or vice versa to the politician. The only few people I've seen that are actually adhering to the Constitution are basically the libertarians in the party, such as Massey and Ron. And I agree more than anybody else out there with how they do things, how they conduct themselves. But to go back to what Rob said, as far as silencing the opposition, I'm gonna quote one of Rob's favorite guys to debate, which would be Vaush. Vaush is somebody that has grown to prominence for his socialistic beliefs. But the other day he was quoted through a friend of mine by saying that I don't care how we win. All I care about is winning. I don't care, and I'm paraphrasing, what eggs you have to crack, what principles you have to violate. All that matters is winning. Folks, this is what we're up against. Whether you be DeSantis, Trump, it doesn't matter. We are technically still on the same side for now. Or excuse me, we're on different sides in the primary, but we'll probably unite back during the general. But when you have a figurehead on the left, such as Vaush, who this guy is a disgusting, immoral type of person, saying, I don't care how we achieve this victory, that's cause for concern. Because when you have an enemy willing to go to no lengths, any lengths rather, to discredit you, to publicly condemn you, to cause fear. I mean, look at DC Drano. I do not like this man. I think he's a very bad faith actor. He comes out there and says, tag everybody that supported or didn't support Johnson or whatever the case may be, as if it was a means of trying to intimidate people to say, look, you either side with MAGA or we will condemn you, we will ostracize you, we will exile you. Look, these toothless bites mean literally nothing, folks, because when you put the phone down and you go outside and you take a deep breath, you'll realize Twitter, Facebook, Instagram does not reflect a lot of what life really truly is. There are people like myself and Rob and many other people that are in this space right now that are very tuned in and plugged into the political spectrum, because that's a lot of what we have to do. My podcast is about this. We have to stay fluent on these things. But I think the general voter out there, even in the Democrat side of this space, I feel like it's not to that level of, I'm not sure, vitriol, if you would. Because I feel like, look at DeSantis, he polls very well with independents. Why? Because this guy isn't so hardcore right as many people paint him out to be. A lot of moderate Democrats, let's call them Clinton-era Democrats, have way more rationale and reasoning. And what we're seeing with the types of Vaush and the rest of them out there is that the progressives, the extreme progressive, the leftists, if you will, have run buckshot over the DNC and have now taken over. You see the jihad squad out there. You see the things that they're saying, and it's mind-blowing. And the left sits there and they accept it. Rashida Tlaib still will not apologize for the misinformation of the hospital being bombed in Gaza. She won't apologize. They openly support a terrorist organization. The DNC is comprised of the very same things they accuse the right of being. And I feel like, look, don't ever be silenced pressured into being quiet. That's exactly what they want. And it doesn't mean that you have to get a megaphone and go out there and scream it to the sky, but don't let these people that are just bad faith debaters, bad faith individuals try and make you feel bad because they called you a racist. Because ultimately, with the likes of Laura Loomer and the rest of the Dranos, consider the source on this. These people are not honest. They have an objective. It's to get their man into the White House. The people be damned. The Constitution be damned. That's all that matter. Why? Because they are paid. These are grifters. These are not constitutionalists. These are not supporters of actual liberty and freedom. And you see that displayed every day in the things they tweet and say and their actions. And that's what they should be judged by. So, take it with a grain of salt. Don't let these people get to you. All right, we're going to go to Snake.
John, 30 seconds to respond.
Yeah, go ahead, one by. Then we'll go to Snake.
My frustration, and I'm older than most people in this room, is the objective is to keep the Democrats out of the White House in 2025. That's our objective. And anyone who props up a false narrative, when the facts are readily available, is going to hurt us. It's going to kill the republic. We stood there twice. I said, "Oh my God, we're never going to survive Obama." Oh my God, I'm not going to survive Obama a second time. Well, he did far less than Joe Biden has done in 3 years, far less. And I will say this emphatically: this is my last election, in the sense that my last opportunity to maintain this republic. It's it. And Donald Trump, by his actions, like you said, by his actions, demonstrably, whether it's immigration, whether it's COVID, whether it's spending, whether it's foreign policy, any of these issues, I can demonstrably prove that he doesn't deserve the chance. Is DeSantis perfect? No. As you said, there's no politician that's going to pass a purity test, but he's our best option. He's our best option. And if he doesn't win the primary, we can kiss it goodbye.
Let me ask you this one, Byland, real quick. Assuming that DeSantis loses, Trump wins, who are you voting for in the general? You'd still vote for Trump over a third party or Biden?
Well, first of all, let me preface this. This is a cop-out. I live in a blue state. Trump lost by 20 points. I will never vote for Trump as long as I'm in this state. And there's not a likelihood. And I, by the way, I didn't vote for him in 2020. I wrote in Thomas Massie. I've been very honest about that. I don't believe Trump. I believe Trump to be a progressive Democrat. I beg people not to vote for him in the 2016 primary. I was proven correct. And I maintain that. We're not going to do much better, especially if the guy's in prison and we end up earning his VP as the president. It's going to be a mess. So there's no reason for me to vote for Trump again. And no one can substantiate that Trump is going to be better than a Biden based on his record. And he's lame duck. He's not going to be able to hire quality people. When quality people see what this man, how he has cut bait, there is no loyalty, and his method of hiring is horrendous. I mean, I don't see the benefit.
I think that not to kind of get away from the other speakers we had going to talk. I think that this sort of has some contention to what you seem to be suggesting with the first part of your answer, which was sort of that, or, and which is a true statement, that there are so many Trump people that are like us or nothing, right? There are a lot of people that are correct in saying that one of the problems with DeSantis will be, how will he court MAGA voters? Now, you're stupid if you're a MAGA voter and Trump loses the primary and you're like, I'm going to sit this one out. I'm not going to vote for DeSantis. Because even if it's just because you like Trump, the best chance Trump has of the deep state to stop coming after him would be for someone like DeSantis to beat out someone like Biden. So you'd be an idiot. But it's certainly true that there are a lot of people that are embittered and I think dumb that would be unwilling to vote for Trump or unwilling to vote for DeSantis if he beats Trump in the primary. But I think it is equally stupid to say that Trump is just as bad as Biden and that you would sit it out. And even worse.
Well, I would never sit it, Rob. I would never. I have not missed an election in my entire life.
What I mean by sit it out is that you would vote third party, right? And which I think it's even worse to suggest you did it in 2020, especially given that you accurately show that things are getting exponentially worse. So what we saw with Obama was the groundwork, but it's speeding up with Biden. We literally live in a world where the FBI treats you as
Rob,
someone
you're about to make my point. Trump facilitated the deep state. How can you say that that's worse than Biden? Trump himself put us in this position. Trump himself put himself in this position. He subjugated to the deep state. He let Jeff Sessions languish for 20 months. He hired Rod Rosenstein. He hired Christopher Wray. Then he hired Bill Barr. How is that any worse, Rob?
Well, it's worse because do you remember, surveillance being put up with people's pictures being put up, having the largest FBI task force in history targeting people? Please, now listen. The way this works is I let you talk. You have to let me respond, and then you can respond. That's totally fine, right? I don't disagree. I've made many criticisms of the failures of Trump. I think the intended plan of Trump was never to lock up his own people. The intended plan of Biden and the people running the Biden administration is to criminalize opposition. That is the intended plan. So there is a difference in the intention. Does that forgive Trump for pointing a bunch of people that were blatantly from the swamp in order to drain the swamp? No, but it's not a matter of that was his intent, was to screw people over, his own followers. It was that he was incompetent, that he didn't understand what he was up against. And these are all good reasons to suggest voting against Trump, but in a primary, but to suggest that Biden's not worse. We're on the precipice of World War III. We have the largest task force from the FBI in history that's agenda is to go after people that vote for the opposition to Joe Biden. We have lawyers, confidentiality being pierced, attorney-client privilege, being attacked and rounded up en masse because they wanted to defend Trump and wanted to call out some of the things they thought is shoddy from the 2020 election, which many of the things they thought were absolutely correct. We have mass censorship of even being able to criticize anything that happened in the election. These are all demonstrably worse than what was being done under the Trump administration. That doesn't mean that what Trump did couldn't have... Let me finish real quick. It doesn't mean that what Trump did couldn't have laid the groundwork for it. I've said many times, we may have been in a better position had Trump lost in 2016 than we are now, because the deep state, the corruption was going slowly. It was the boiling frog theory, that they were turning up the heat slowly. Once Trump won, they, I believe, did have an oh shit moment where they were like, this guy could release the information that would make the American people see how corrupt we are. He didn't do that. I completely agree with you. But that doesn't mean that if I have to choose in 2024 between Donald Trump or Joe Biden, that I'm going to take the guy who doesn't know where he's at, that's being run by holdovers from the Obama administration, that has us on the precipice of World War III, that pushes all this sexuality on our children, that's pushing all of this cultural Marxist stuff, that has an open, porous border, that is treating me and people like me like the opposition and threatening to throw me into prison forever. I refuse to believe that voting for Biden would be preferable to voting for Donald Trump.
All right. I didn't say voting for Biden would be preferable. What I'm saying is voting for Trump is not going to achieve any better results. And going back to make one prior point, this whole thing was hatched in Obama's Oval Office with Biden as a participant. They were spying on him. Admiral Rogers came to Donald Trump, told him about the spying. They had to move the transition from Trump Towers to Bedminster. Trump knew from the beginning and was incompetent throughout. He laid the groundwork for this. He facilitated what we are experiencing now with the weaponization of the FBI and so forth. That's the problem. He's not a true alternative. This country may have to shake up at the Republican convention and reject Trump. That may be what has to happen. But what I'm saying is, Trump, God, I'm just flabbergasted because he is everything the opposite of what Macedonia represents.
What you're talking about is a failure.
Rob, one last statement, and I'll stand down. We hear this phrase all the time, and this is the frustrating thing where I can't even tolerate listening to them. Well, Trump hired everybody to expose them. Dude, how many times have you heard that, Rob?
But say it again. Trump tried to expose him? Is that what you said?
No. The excuse, a consistent meme is Trump hired these people to expose them.
Yeah, that's stupid. The QAnon stuff's completely stupid. Absolutely agree. But let me
interject something here real quick, Rob, because number one, we're going to have to wrap the space up here very shortly because I got to go live on the American Savage Show podcast. I want to keep these spaces between an hour and a half. I think we've agreed that we want to do this every Thursday and Friday, Rob.
Yeah,
but
sounds good.
To answer your question, and I know we have a lot of hands up. I apologize for not being able to get to you. We will do it next. We're going to be doing the same thing tomorrow at 10 a.m. CST, so you're more than welcome to come back. But I want to interject as to why I will not vote for Trump in a general. Here's the reasoning why. I have seen nothing but MAGA first politicians pledge fealty to Donald Trump. Everybody says Donald Trump is the leader of the party. I'm in firm disagreement and opposition to this. The voters are the leader of the said party. Now, I understand that we have to have a figurehead to get behind to an extent. I recognize that. But I have seen the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene. I have seen the likes of many people out there do more to favor Donald Trump than what the voters actually stand for. I cannot agree to that. I do agree with one by to an extent. I'm not going to say that Biden is better than Trump. But look, if we go by Trump's policies, this guy is, again, like I said, he is a New York Democrat. I realize that, and I understand that these are some very difficult times and choices we have to make. But look, I'm not going to sit here and say that, look, if we don't get Trump or DeSantis back in and we get another 4 years of Biden, which I do not think it'll be Biden, I do think it'll be Newsom, this country is done. I disagree. We have went through even more difficult times. If you're old enough to remember, we have. And people try and use that to rationalize saying you must get behind this guy. I firmly disagree. I do not agree with that at all. I feel like, look, we're going to suffer through 4 years, but the reasoning before that is the MAGA movement, not necessarily the people. It needs to go. It needs to go away. I'm sorry. I do not like this idea of that everybody has to give a North and South as far as what Donald Trump says. Trump has been wrong on so much. And those politicians, I would have more respect for Marjorie Taylor Greene if she ever stood up and condemned Trump for the things that he said and he did that went against the Constitution. But she will not do that. And just like I would have literally no respect for a Democrat doing the same thing, it proves to me that you care more about the favorability and the protection and the elongation of a political career than you do what the people actually want. And that is very concerning. This movement of the cult of personality needs to go away, and we need to start getting back to holding our representatives accountable to the people, not the man, not the politician, not the president. It's what the people want. And if the representatives do not go up there and vote in line with what the people say, and more so in saying, what does Donald Trump say? Then you are no longer on the people's sides. Now you're on Donald Trump's side. And I'm sorry, I feel like that's where we've gone tremendously wrong. That's why we have a fractured GOP right now. We need to be united. We need actual leadership. And I don't see that from Trump. Where Trump goes, we see nothing but chaos. We see disorganization. We see me, 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 me. I am tired of it. I'm sick of it. I want someone that's going to go up there and actually lead. And that's not Trump. So I will endure 4 more years of hell for the long game of saying, look, get MAGA out. Let's get some staunch conservatives in there. And when I say conservative, I mean constitutionalists. I'm not saying Romneys. I'm not saying Paul Ryan's. I'm saying constitutionalists. Let's give those guys a chance because we still haven't done that. We have the Masseys. We have these. Those are the ones that I want to see in charge. I wish Massey would run for president. Those are the ones that I would staunchly support. But I cannot sit there and say that I will vote for Donald Trump just because, it's the lesser of two evils. I'd rather vote third party and say, look, let's endure 4 more years of hell and get through this, and let's get MAGA out of office, and let's get actual constitutionally sound representatives in office. That's where I stand on that one. I know it's not what people want to hear, but I feel like if we vote in Trump, that ushers in more MAGA conservatives. And quite frankly, that to me, a lot of it is the swamp. A lot of the corruption, as well as compounded with the old the old neocon boomer establishment. It's like we have 2 swamps here. And ultimately, it's the people that suffer. So that's where I stand on that.
I'll just say real quick, and if we have time to get anyone else in, that's fine, John. I'll just say this real quick. I couldn't disagree more. I think that it's actually contradictory to the idea of the purity test thing that you've condemned. For example, if I'm talking to you and won by land and DeSantis wins the primary and then he ends up losing the general election by 40,000 votes in 3 states, and the reason is there's 10% of Trump voters that were like, I'm going to sit it out because it's my guy or no one. I don't like DeSantis. You would say those people are nuts. Those people cost us dearly. Now we're going to have 4 more years of Democrats because these people engaged in a purity test and they were in a cult and they refused to vote for the other guy because they thought that guy was counter to their guy. I would say the same thing to you and won by land. I don't think you have to like Trump. I think there are things to criticize about Trump, but I think that he is demonstrably better than what the Democrats are going to be offering, whether it be Biden or Newsom. And I think to say out of both of these things simultaneously, we need someone to bring the party together, but I won't vote for your guy if he wins the primary nomination, is going to further divide the party. Because what will happen will be there will be a bunch of MAGA people that will listen to comments like that from people I think are good patriots that will say, well, to hell with these people because they say never my guy. So I'm going to say never their guy. And then you're
Rob, your comparison here is inaccurate, though. You're doing a side-by-side on 2 people saying they're on the same team when, in fact, they're not. DeSantis and Trump are polar opposites, and as far as the uniting of the GOP, we are fractured, and we were fractured under Trump to a degree. He was the one that locked us all down. So I'm afraid I have to disagree with you on that one. I feel like doing a side-by-side is very disingenuous. Go into depth as far as what each one represents through actions, not words, but actions. So I feel like I get your premise here. I understand that I don't want Democrats in charge either. But my overall point, though, is I want the Trump era politicians gone. And that starts with Trump himself. I don't want him prosecuted. I don't want this guy to go to jail. But at the same token, he abandoned the J6ers. Now, I'm not saying you should have pardoned him, but this guy goes out there and fundraises on the backs of political prosecution. Meanwhile, I've interviewed these J6ers on the podcast. Their lives have been totally destroyed. And what does Trump do? He is out there playing golf in Mar-a-Lago. It's like, look, if you're going to be a leader, then lead. And if you're not, get out of the way. So I don't want 4 more years of Donald Trump, because what did it get us? It got us lockdowns. It got us all this stuff. So I get your point. Look, I understand it. I partially agree with it. I wish things were different. But as far as this purity test, I'm not saying that, look, I'm going to agree with everything DeSantis does. But in terms of a side-by-side, I think DeSantis is far better. To vote for Trump, I feel, is just taking another step backwards and ushering in more MAGA politicians. Rob, you can respond, and then we're going to have to end the space.
Okay, yeah.
Guys,
I'll just say, I think that...
Can I say one thing to Jamal before you guys close down the space, after you guys are done, after Rob is done?
It's over to Rob.
Yeah, that's fine with me as long as John's cool with it. I'll just say real quick, I mean, you said it there, though. You're like, I think that what is represented by Donald Trump and versus DeSantis in the policies they do are diametrically opposed. Like, that's going to be the message that MAGA people take. And regardless of what you think happened in the 2020 election, 78 million people voted for Trump. Now there's obviously a large swath of those that will say, I'm cool with DeSantis too. But there's an awful lot of those that if they hear the message of DeSantis is completely opposite of Trump, he's not someone that's similar. He's not someone that shares ideals. When it comes to the actual on-the-ground actions, he represents the opposite of Trump. And therefore, if you're a DeSantis follower, you shouldn't vote for Trump in the general if DeSantis doesn't win the primary, because what they actually represent is the opposite. That is a message that MAGA people will take to heart. And regardless of, and I'll just say, the way it looks now, maybe I'll be proven wrong. I think Trump's going to win this primary. And I think it's because, fairly or notly, there are more Trump supporters than DeSantis supporters right now. You might say that's because they don't know DeSantis as well. Could absolutely be true. But to alienate those people by having large swaths of people that are vocal DeSantis supporters saying, no, he's completely different than Trump, he's the opposite, so much so that we would choose to not vote for Trump in a general. I think that is the very divisiveness that you seek to be trying to eliminate. That's what I think.
Snake, over to you, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to. I would love to comment on all that, because I totally agree with John and not Rob, and there's very strong reasons and arguments. But I know that you got to close it down, John. I just wanted
suck it, Rob. No, I'm kidding.
I just wanted to say to Jamal before. First of all, thank you for coming in this space. Thank you for being honest about who you support, why you support him. I would suggest that you take a close look at the foreign policy actions of Trump, that you look into the Bush war powers, who promised to give those back and get rid of them, who didn't, who used them, etc. I'm asking you to please look into, as awesome as it seemed at the time when he attacked Soleimani in Iraq, what that almost led to. I ask that you please look into Yemen and Syria and the boots on the ground in Africa, etc., and how there was a misuse of our military, and military men were put in the way and were killed, and that we were fighting a proxy war against Russia and against a lot of other Iran, etc., during the whole time that Trump was president. So I just wanted to say that really quick. There is a lot there to unpack that people paid no attention to, including liberals, because they agreed with doing it, because liberals had left being the no war party. They are now fully into getting involved in every foreign conflict. So because of that, we as Americans did not hear about the things that Trump did overseas. And we really need to open our eyes, because there were a lot of things that were very detrimental, very dangerous, and caused a lot of American deaths. So just something to throw out there real quick.
Appreciate that, Snake. Guys, I'm afraid I have to end this. Want to thank everybody for tuning in today. We'll be doing this again tomorrow, same time, 10 a.m. I think Rob and I have agreed to do this on Thursdays and Fridays. Look, I cannot say this enough. I love Rob. This dude, I have so much respect for this guy. Aftershock down there, I know you are Rob's biggest fanboy. I love Aftershock too. These are some great patriotic Americans. We disagree on some of these issues, but fundamentally I believe that we are all in alignment. We just see things slightly different. Thanks to Rob for coming here and doing this with me. You should follow this guy, listen to what he has to say. I appreciate everybody else for coming into the space and, sharing your viewpoints. We're going to have more of these, like I said. Rob, any final thoughts, sir?
No, it's a blast. And I just want to say, like we talked about, like you mentioned Vosh and people like that winning by any means necessary. You know what separates us? Look how we could have a civil discussion here, even disagreeing with things, and we're actually concerned about what we all as good people think about each other in our opinion. So I love spaces like this. I love talking to great people that I know we have the same agenda where they want this country to go, to be great for everyone, and I love having robust disagreements. So this is great. I can't wait to continue it, and thank you to everyone that participated and listened. I really appreciate all of you.
All right, folks, about to go live over on Rumble at John Burk for the All American Savage Show podcast. And again, thanks to Rob and everybody else for tuning in. We will see you right here tomorrow at 10 a.m. CST. Take care, guys.
All right. Leave the space there.
All American Savage Show podcast.
Maybe. There we go. All right. Yeah, you guys can go check out John's show on Rumble. I'll just say I couldn't disagree more. I think it's actually kind of troubling to hear that. Look, you're not going to find someone that has criticized Trump more effectively. One of the things I was going to say is people that supported Trump tend to be the people that could criticize him the most effectively, because I don't have to paint him as some cartoon character, Russian spy that's, some mustache twirling racist that hates disabled people in order to, criticize him. I could criticize him for the things he actually did. I have no problem with the criticism that John and One It by Land and Snake are making about Trump, and they're absolutely right to say that there's an awful lot of Trump supporters that want to overlook all of the stuff he did that were negative or that were ineffectual and things like that. And they're also right that if you don't criticize and if you're just a yes man and you treat things like a cult, you'll never actually get the victories that you want, because instead of actually being principled and pushing for principles, you're pushing for a cult of personality, and that's not the right thing to do. However, given all of that, I completely disagree that somehow, it seemed that One by Land was trying to suggest that sort of the Trump presidency was just as bad as the Biden presidency or the Obama presidency. Particularly, his bugaboo seemed to be foreign policy. I just think that's functionally untrue. It is untrue to say that it was all peace and roses when Trump was there. That's not true. And there are people that say that, and it's worth criticizing that. But the idea that things were just as bad then as they are now is laughable. It's laughable. I mean, thank you, AC. It's just, and if you voted in 2020 for third party, because I don't like Trump, and I'm, okay, here we are. And I don't buy the idea of, well, it's because I'm in a blue state. I'm sorry, no. I don't buy that. And it doesn't mean that I'm saying, oh, you're a terrible person that I'll never listen to, that we don't have things that we agree on, that we don't have an agenda at the end of the day, or a picture of what we want the country to look like that's similar. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying this is what happens. My volume was a little low. I'll up it next. Check. Wait a minute. Check. Was it low the whole time? Oh, I bet because I ended that spaces. It's weird the way that. There we go. That should be better. Sorry about that. John Burk on Rumble. Let me find his Rumble channel for you, actually. By the way, kudos to Jamal for name dropping the Gap Band. Damn, that is amazing. She dropped the bomb on me. This is good stuff. And it actually, given that we were talking about war and stuff like that, like a Gap Band reference, whose big song was You Dropped the Bomb on Me. Pretty good. Hats off to Jamal there. Sorry, Cold Slice of Bread. I'm sorry about that. It probably sounded better on the Twitch space. But apologies. But yeah, we'll make sure. So yeah, I think we're going to be doing that every Thursday, Friday. And who knows, maybe I'll be able to convince John and his audience that it's worth voting for Trump. But the idea of talking about purity tests and things like that, and then being like, but if it's not my guy, if it's Trump, I'm not going to vote for him. That is the literal definition, as far as I'm concerned, of a purity test. I don't know what to say. To me, Trump, I understand the frustration, and this is what I don't get. This is why I think the best person I've seen on this, on Twitter or anything, is Jesse Kelly, right? Where Jesse Kelly has been, like, excuse the language here, but it's basically like, I don't give a shit. Let the Trump people and DeSantis people fucking yell at each other. I don't care. That's exactly how I feel. I still to this day don't know which one I'll vote for in the primary. I've outlined the case, pros and cons for both of them. I've been quite open since I've been streaming, even before the 2020 election, since 2017, 2018. I'm basically a single issue voter who could out this corruption the best. That's it. And so looking at it through that lens, there are pros and cons to both Trump and DeSantis. I've been vocal with those. DeSantis has surrounded himself with people that seem to be more moderate, that won't do the things that are necessary to sort of how corrupt the FBI's been and things like that. Trump had his chance and failed miserably and still doesn't seem to get the magnitude of what he's up against. So I don't know. I don't know who would have a better chance to do it. Vivek seems to be saying the right things, but has questionable past and has contradicted himself in the past and seems to be upset when you bring it up and probably doesn't have a chance in hell anyway. Obviously doesn't. But I certainly have no problem voting for Trump or DeSantis, whoever wins the primary. None. They both at least claim to represent fighting against an establishment. You might question how effective they would be. But that's different than the intent to actually use that establishment to go after your opponents, which is what the Democrats are doing. Is my volume still too low? Hopefully it's a little better now. Sorry, same token. Was it low the whole time? Sometimes when I close out an application, it, for some reason, automatically moves my mic down. Yeah. So I'll make sure tomorrow that it's better. But nonetheless, that's sort of the show for today. Now, I do want to mention things coming up in the future. I'm going to talk to Andrew Wilson. So Aftershock had this great idea, which I think Andrew Wilson cribbed. Actually, probably not. Andrew probably came up with it on his own, which was to sort of get a foothold in TikTok spaces. And if you remember, I debated two people from TikTok. They were both fucking joke. But I did that. The problem I had, and if you actually look, I think it still might say on my Twitch and YouTube I'm trying to get to 1,000 followers on TikTok because I can't join TikTok calls and TikTok group chats until I have 1,000 followers. I can't do live streams on TikTok until I have 1,000 followers. But the idea was that it's this space where people you could potentially reach, particularly younger people that use that aren't really exposed to views like I have or that John has or that Andrew Wilson has. And so that seemed like a ripe place to get in and start engaging in these debates, particularly because the people that are vocal on these platforms espousing these left-wing positions are terrible. They're just terrible. So anyways, Andrew Wilson actually, I don't know if he collaborated with Aftershock or if he just came up with this on his own simultaneously. He actually has a more expansive operation where he now has the ability to live stream on TikTok and also has enough followers that he's able to get into these group chats and debates and things like that. And he actually has a network of people that's working with the Crucible that actually gets him in queue in some of these TikTok channels that are doing live streams that are doing these sorts of debates where he could just go on and wreck people. And last night it was absolutely hilarious. Now, Andrew generously, even though we don't agree on everything, he's trying to build a coalition of people that will work with the Crucible to go into these online spaces and sort of rack up victories, which he knows I'll be able to do. Now, Andrew comes at it from more of a Christian nationalist perspective. That's certainly not me, and not everyone in the Crucible space is going to like that about me. That's perfectly fine. Yet, I'll still be able to wreck these lefties, particularly on the issues of politics that I want to talk about. And I think you could even see today a lot of what I say actually lines up with a lot of the Crucible audience, such as we do need a return to the Christian principles and moral authority that this country was founded on. You could get there through an authority. I don't necessarily think we should enforce Christianity on people, that we should have Christian nationalism, but the basis for our moral judgment should be based in the beliefs of Christianity and the sort of moral prescriptions that they recommend. I do agree with that. So that's my belief. So I think it'll be interesting. I'm going to talk to Andrew at some point today, where if you haven't followed me on TikTok, go ahead and give me a follow. If you're like, I don't follow them because they're Chinese spyware, totally, you're right. I totally get it. You're probably right. Keep following me on Twitch. That's Amazon spyware, so that Jeff Bezos could get all of your information. Follow me on YouTube so the generous people that run Google and Alphabet that want to throw you in gulags the rest of your life can also have access to all your information. Or you can follow me on places like Facebook so Mark Zuckerberg could use your information to steal elections more. But thank you for taking that principled stance against TikTok. It's good that we do that. No, I'm just kidding. I get it. Everyone has a personal preference. TikTok probably is worse. Objectively, it probably is worse, but it's always funny. People used to say that all the time. Like, I'd be like, hey, I have a Patreon. People be like, I don't want to give you money through Patreon because, they've done all kinds of shady shit and they've screwed over conservatives. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Well, you could send me super chats on YouTube. Yeah, I don't want to benefit YouTube because they take a portion of that and YouTube sucks. I'm like, absolutely, totally agree. Well, here's Twitch. You can follow me on Twitch, subscribe on Twitch, send money. Twitch sucks. It's ran by Amazon. They're terrible. Yep. How about PayPal? I'm like, well, if you want to get right down to it, you want a list of the shit that PayPal's done that's anti-conservative? Oh, okay. You know, that's what sucks about losing the culture war. All of these platforms that we use that are necessary are ran by people that hate our guts, and not just the streaming platforms, the payment processors. It's crazy. It really is. That's why I was cheering so hard for, Andrew's pay processor to take off, dono.chat to take off so you could operate outside of that. So, anyways, with any luck, I'll get to 1,000 TikTok subscribers with the help of the people at the Crucible. And then I'll be doing regular shows both on my channel and on the Crucible where I just randomly get on my computer. I'm like, okay, let's see who's on TikTok and let's go in and bury some people. And you don't have to be rude to do it. If you watched Andrew's stream last night, he's not being rude. I don't think so. He's going on there quite affably. And it's people that have never even heard anyone challenge their positions. For example, the one debate was, is being gay bad? And Andrew's like, well, where do you derive your sense of morality? And they're like, well, why would we need to know that? Well, you're using a word that implies morality. You said bad, which is the opposite of good. And so we need to know how you define good and bad, which is where do you get your morality from? And they don't have an answer. And they're like, we just want to know if you think it's bad. And he says, yes, I think it's bad because of my religious beliefs and what I'm told based on my religious beliefs. And they're like, well, that's stupid. You're banned. They have no clue. No clue. Like, they've never heard. They act like they want people to disagree with them. They don't. And they're younger people, and they have no clue. You don't have to go in there and just be like, F you. You don't have to do that. You can go in and be... And that's the thing. Right? That's the difference between... And I said this at the beginning, if you weren't there, of the Twitter Spaces that I did with John. Say what you will about... And again, I massively disagree with how that ended with John and some of the people that were on their snake, that they won't vote for Trump. I think that's lunacy. I really do. And we'll talk about it more in the future. But I don't think it makes them bad people. I'm not suggesting that in any way, shape, or form. However, one thing I hope that even if you dislike John and his political beliefs, or you dislike me and my political beliefs, and I know maybe it's harder to believe with me because I'm on here ranting and raving and screaming at people so often. We're happy people. We like what we do. We like our lives. At least I do. Juxtapose that to so many of these people you see on the left that you see streaming. Go look at Ethan from H3H3. See how he's doing today. He's cultivated, I believe Ethan's Jewish, he's cultivated a community of people that hate him based on his ethnicity. Because he cultivated radical lefties. There you go. See, when I'm cultivating a community of people that aren't looking at me through a parasocial relationship, that feel absolutely comfortable disagreeing with me, that feel absolutely comfortable telling me if they think I'm full of shit in an issue, it leads to a much better experience. That's how I feel. I walk away here despite if I'm yelling and screaming at someone, I feel great. I had a pretty shitty situation in my personal life come up this week, but I think it's been resolved. And it feels like a weight off my shoulders, but it's not something I'm really going to talk about. But I am a very happy person, and I'm a very, very, very lucky person. Yeah, I saw that, Robert. It's crazy. Hot tub stream? Okay. Actually, I'm getting a hot tub put in. It's like an inflatable one, but maybe we'll do a shoulder up hot tub stream someday. No, don't hold your breath. Last thing else. So tune in tomorrow around 11 a.m., barring anything coming up, and we'll be doing another about an hour to an hour and a half long. Remember, when it comes to those Twitter Spaces, you should be following me on Twitter. It's just at robnoerr, and you could join in on those. You could get in the queue, and you could speak to me or John if you have something to agree or disagree with either of us. We'll happily have you on. So I think that's a good opportunity to interact with more people. Last thing I'll say has nothing to do with sort of anything we talked about today, but I'm flabbergasted. If you followed the saga of Pisco and I and sort of discussions that we've had and how the last conversation ended, I was incredibly rude to Pisco, and I'd like to apologize. I really would. And that apology is for not being rude to him earlier. Because what he terms, that's his word, rude, is me finally laughing at his bad faith, stupid fucking ass. That's what it is. And it comes through in the issue we were talking about, which was Representative Jamal Bowman pulling a fire alarm and Pisco trying to sell to me, you, and the world that although it's unlikely that Jamal Bowman pulled that fire alarm because he thought that it would open a door, that is unlikely. It is more unlikely that he pulled it thinking the alarm would cause a delay. That's more unlikely. That's laughable. It's absolutely laughable. You don't have to sit there and go through a 3-hour, well, let's look at the electronics of how this is set up and blah, blah, blah. You don't need to do anything. We did that. We did have a big, long 1.5, 2-hour discussion where parts of it was taking it serious and other parts of it was laughing whenever I saw fit to do when I felt. But that's it. To me, that represents everything. Just like you should have known, I should have known, you probably did know, with the whole Martha's Vineyard thing. Oh, Martha's Vineyard, one of the richest communities in this country. It just didn't have the resources to take care of 50 illegals for more than 48 hours. Just didn't have the resources. It's laughable. It's a fucking laughable statement. Now, how do you think it goes then when we switch off and we start talking about, well, monies got sent to Joe Biden's family from Jim Biden, in the context of this loans, and it could suggest that there were some of these payments. How do you think he's going to approach that? If he's so fucking partisan bad faith that he's going to make these Martha's Vineyard argument and then more recently this fire alarm argument. So I was willing to let it go and just be like, Pisco, if I'm on a panel or something with you, I'll fucking laugh at you and I'll be like, yeah, this is a dude that thinks pulling the fire alarm opens the door. That was why Jamal Bowman pulled the fire alarm. There you go. Just so you know. And I get it, the lefty online Twitch sphere bubble, the average Pisco follower or Destiny follower, they'll eat that shit up because they're fucking morons and they're bad faith. Got it. Get it. That's fine. You can get your little likes in your little community and high-five each other. Clearly, all of us are pulling fire alarms every time we see a door that's locked. That's how the world works, right? That's how everyone does things, right? I mean, come on, Rob's a lunatic for thinking otherwise, right? It's fine. They can have that. But everyone with half a fucking brain that's reasonably objective can see the bullshit for what it is. They can. So I was more than happy to let it go. Yet to my chagrin, Pisco actually restarts the debate up. Restarts it up today on Twitter. Restarts the debate. He posts this. And nothing. Last time I spoke with robnoerr, who I like, he was rude as shit to me because I said it was possible that an alarm could in fact open a door. For your consideration, a video appearing to show the Capitol's delayed egress system set to 15 seconds. Let's look at this, right? So, oh wow, Pisco found video evidence of what he's suggesting, right? So here, let's see what the video shows. Ready?
Hey morons. The sign says to push the door for 3 seconds until the alarm sounds, then wait 15 seconds and the door will be unlocked. If he could read, this guy would understand that. So what do you think is going to happen at the end of this 15-second countdown? Oh, look. The door was unlocked. Big fucking surprise.
Wow, well, Pisco just crushed me. That's it. Wow. Wow. Okay, what can you say to that? Pisco just crushed... Oh, wait, that was my argument! Pisco just put up a video that entirely made my argument and contradicted his. Pisco... My argument was, look, the dude was trying to trigger an alarm. That's why he tried to go. He knew the door was locked. That's why he intentionally pulled a fire alarm. Pisco says, but this sign was up. And it was a sign that was very similar to the one you could see here. It said 30 seconds, though. Emergency exit. Push until alarm sounds. It's on the door. Push the door handle until the alarm sounds. Door will unlock, I think it said in 30 seconds. And I said, well, it sounds to me like what that suggests is I push the handle of the door, I hold it in, and then an alarm will sound. And then after the 30 seconds, the door will unlock. That's what it sounds like to me. That doesn't sound like, oh, and there's a fire alarm on that wall over there. So instead of pushing the door handle in, as this sign suggests, I believe I'll go over and pull that alarm on the wall, which will then unlock the door. That sounds unreasonable. That was my position. And Pisco said, but Rob, is it possible that it's the actual alarm itself that unlocks the door and not the mechanism of holding the handle in for 3 seconds, which then triggers an alarm, which then unlocks the door? I said, I guess that could be possible. He said, what percentage? I said, maybe 20%, but no person would ever come to the conclusion upon seeing a locked door that pulling the fire, especially if they saw the sign, that meant pull the fire alarm over here to unlock it. And then that resulted in Pisco saying things. I said, Pisco, if you came to a locked door, what are the percentage chance that you would think I'll pull the fire alarm to unlock the door? He said 0. I said, okay, then there's no excuse for Bowman here. He says, oh, wait. But if it was an emergency door, I said, what are you talking about? I said, if you came to a door, that would also include emergency doors. If you're saying there's a 0% chance, he says, the reason I didn't consider emergency doors in your scenario was, and I'm quoting now, that as a non-security expert, Pisco thought that all emergency doors ever were unlocked. Even though the exact situation that we're debating is a security door that was locked. And that's because he's such a bad faith fucking bullshitter. That's how when you lead them step by step, they have to keep changing their story, and they end up looking fucking ridiculous. Absolutely fucking ridiculous. So at the end of the day, my argument was, yeah, I could see how you could think, hold this door handle in for 3 seconds, which will trigger an alarm, which then 30 seconds later unlocks the door. I could see how someone would think that. You'd have to be a fucking lunatic to, without an emergency, intentionally trigger an emergency alarm. That's really bad to do. But I could see how you would think, if I hold this door handle in, it will eventually trigger an alarm and open the door, because that's what it does. I get that, right? I can't see how you could come to the conclusion, instead of holding the door handle in, what I should instead do is go over and pull the fire alarm. That I cannot see. That was my position. Pisco's position was, no, he could have pulled the fire alarm thinking it would unlock the door, right? And then, weeks later, Pisco's like, here's a video. Again, look what Pisco says here. He says, last time I spoke to robnoerr, who I like, he was rude as shit to me because I said it was possible that an alarm could in fact open a door. For your consideration, a video appearing to show the Capitol's delayed egress system set to 15 seconds. So he's gaslighting his audience into thinking that he just said that it's possible that if you push this door handle in, an alarm could trigger, which would then open the door, implying that I said the opposite. That's not true. He's actually gaslighting his audience to the opposite of the truth. I never said that I didn't believe that holding in this handle could trigger an alarm and then the door would open. I said that the idea that pulling a separate alarm could unlock that door seemed almost impossible to think that a person would reach that conclusion, as opposed to just pushing the door handle open as the door suggests. And there's only about a 20% chance that that's how the mechanism could possibly work anyways. Because the question would be this. If I go and push a door handle in for 3 seconds, does that mechanical pushing of the handle what ends up triggering the unlock? Or is it the sound of the alarm itself that would trigger the unlock, which would mean that the wall itself, that alarm could trigger the unlock? That's the issue of disagreement we're having. So Pisco then gaslights his audience into saying, no, Rob said that like pushing this handle could never unlock. It would never trigger an alarm, which would then result in an unlocking. That's what Rob said, and I said it was possible. So here's a video. And let's go back and again watch the video. What's important to watch about this video is, notice how the video is mocking, even with the little sort of Tim and Eric, like mind-blowing thing. Notice how it's mocking this guy, because it's like, dude, if you just read the sign, you would know how the door works. This video is literally making my argument. That's what I'm saying. If Jamal Bowman would have read the sign, he would know that it's not pulling the alarm on the side of the wall that unlocks the door. It's just pushing the handle. And Pisco knows that, but he wants to gaslight his audience. And it works, of course. You're going to have a bunch of people from his audience liking his post going, yeah, Pisco won that argument. Because Pisco has just gaslit people into defaulting what my argument was and pretending it was his argument all along. So watch again how it shows how fucking ridiculous. Again, the entire point of this video is mocking the idea that someone wouldn't understand based on this sign that you hold the handle in and that's how the door unlocks.
Hey morons. The sign says to push the door for 3 seconds until the alarm sounds, then wait 15 seconds and the door will be unlocked. If he could read, this guy would understand that. So what do you think is going to happen at the end of this 15-second countdown? Oh, look. The door was unlocked. Big fucking surprise. Hey, more.
So just in case you're wondering, it's not enough that Pisco has to go on like a little fucking puppet and make an asshole of himself by pretending, actually, it's absurd to think that pulling an alarm could cause a delay. That's an absurdity. That'd be, oh my God, how could anyone ever think that pulling a fire alarm would cause a delay? I don't even, I can't even comprehend that. That's so ridiculous. Now, it seems ridiculous to think pulling the alarm could open the door, but, I guess it's less ridiculous than thinking it could cause a delay. That's Pisco's position. It's bad enough that he had to go trot out there and make that ridiculous fucking claim. And if you follow the rest of what Pisco says, which regrettably I do sometimes, see what he says on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, he's of the person who has made it central to his political leanings that January 6th was this terrible insurrection and that MAGA people deserve to be targeted and they deserve to be thrown in gulags and the lawyers that represented them deserve to be targeted, etc., 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 because this was a serious attempt to overthrow the government. So because of that and the rationale that they've used to explain that it's about delaying official proceedings and things like that, when someone that he and his party does the same fucking type of action, tries to delay an official proceeding, he has to make little of it. And so in order to do that, and that's what I told you when you go back and you watch the big 3-hour discussion that we had, I said what Pisco's here to do is try to sound like the reasonable middle guy. Oh yeah, what Bowman did was bad and it might be this misdemeanor, and yeah, maybe he should be investigated and in charge for that. But then when I say, oh, well, it also looks like we should monitor his communications to see who he talked to, because if he was attempting to delay official proceeding, then perhaps he had text messages, emails, etc. with other members of the Democratic Party suggesting a plan to do so. So that's what we did to January 6th people. That's what we should do, right? And he should be locked up in pretrial detention and, right, all of this shit, right? He's an insurrectionist, right? He tried to stop delaying official proceeding, right? Oh, no, not that. And I told you that's exactly what Pisco's role in this would be to try to come off sounding reasonable by saying technically what he did was bad. It's the same shit he did with the FISA warrants. Yeah. I guess that it was unlawful or illegal for the FBI to spy on Trump's team, I guess, but it's not really that big of a deal, right? But that's how he could position himself, and that's what smarter people try to do that are on the left. They know that the average person will be like, well, that's fucked up. So he could be like, yeah, I agree, it's kind of bad, but it's not really that bad. That's the sort of tack that he's trying to take. And so you can see how he has to look like a fucking ridiculous monkey with a dress on or something, like dog whistles, like, oh, it's not really see here, isn't it true? And you can see in that discussion what he tries to do. He tries to hyper-focus on isn't it technically possible that technically there could be a door set up, that pulling an alarm on the wall would be instrumental in the unlocking of that door? Yes, technically that'd be possible. Therefore, that's more likely of a scenario than Jabal Momin thought that pulling a fire alarm would actually have some sort of delaying effect. That's what he's trying to do. He's trying to give any sort of plausible deniability. Now, if you follow him and anyone on the left, you can see that that's the inverse of what they do surrounding anyone surrounding Trump or anything like that. It is always, they're guilty, I know what their intent is, there's no other possible explanation, it's the only way things could have been done. So they do the exact inverse when it comes to that. And that's what his role was. And I was content to leave him go. He was made a fucking fool of. I got to laugh at him. I'll laugh at him when I interact with him in the future on this. But no, he has to keep fucking doubling down. He knows how ridiculous he looks, and it probably stuck in his craw. So he's like, I'll gaslight my audience later. So that 2 months from now, 3 months from now, when I embarrass Pisco again, inevitably in any fucking conversation we have, they'll be able to go, remember the time Rob thought that, following that sign wouldn't unlock the door? Remember that? Remember how Pisco had to school him? How holding in the door handle triggered an alarm that unlocked the door? Which is the exact opposite of the truth. The exact opposite. And Pisco's intentionally doing that. He is intentionally gaslighting his audience. And I've talked about this before. It has the hallmarks of a deeply loved person of mine who I've argued with in real life that I think literally, in that case, is someone that has some sort of mental disorder. And I can remember the exact conversation. I was having a conversation with this person in a car, and we were talking about the Pittsburgh Pirates, and their best pitcher at the time was a guy by the name of Paul Maholm. And This person was telling me that they need to get rid of Paul Maholm, even though he was their best pitcher. I said, why would you get rid of your best pitcher? Maybe if your argument is trade him for prospects. But he was like, no, just get rid of him. And his argument was because his fastball wasn't fast enough. And I was like, well, who cares? He has a good curveball. His ERA is good. He's getting a lot of people out. He gets a lot of pitch to contact, blah, 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 blah. The amount of runs he's given up isn't that bad. So who cares if the one weapon that you could have, a high fastball, isn't something he has? No, that's all bullshit. The fastball is what you need, blah, blah, blah. So we have this argument for like 25 minutes. I won't bore you with the details, but by the time we pull into our destination in the car, the person I'm arguing with looks at me and goes, that's why I think you're fucking stupid for getting rid of Maholm. Who cares if he has a good fastball? And I was like, that's my argument. That's literally why we're arguing. Because I adapted that position and you adopted the position that I was wrong. And he's like, nah, you're full of shit. This is my position. That's what Piska's doing. That's what he's doing. Here's a video that proves Rob's point of view, but I'm just going to act like it was my point of view and say, see, I don't know what Rob was up with Rob. And it's not because he's dumb. And it's not because he has a technical mental disorder or something like that. He does have a disorder. And that disorder is TDS. That disorder is that he will defend the system against Trump in any way possible. He'll say, yeah, give Bowman a slap in the wrist. He wouldn't even give a shit saying send Bowman to prison forever. He wouldn't. He don't give a shit. He don't give a shit about Hillary Clinton. He don't care about Joe Biden. He don't care about Gavin Newsom. None of these individual politicians does he care about. He cares about Trump. He cares about defending a system that corruptly went after Trump and Trump-connected people. He cares about that politically amongst anything else. That is his top priority. So he will never admit to serious corruption or double standards in those institutions, no matter what proof is provided. And if he ever has to admit that there's any corruption on the Democratic Party, he will admit it, and then he will say, but that's just that one individual person and we condemn him. That's what the Democrats are trying to do with Bob Menendez. See, with Menendez, we're like, he's corrupt, get rid of him. Menendez isn't accused of anything that the Bidens aren't. It's not that they like Biden and don't like Menendez. It's that they understand perceptually how bad it will be if the Bidens did what Menendez is accused of doing and the FBI allowed him to get away with it for 10 years. That's what the problem will be. So that's why they can't admit it. And there's no point in having debates on it, which I've done. And people could say, you're running from debates. I'll have them again. I don't give a fuck. Because I like talking about the particulars of this and no one wants to debate me on the particulars of it. But anyone who thinks I'm running from a debate from him or anyone else when it comes to these issues of corruption is clearly huffing copium. But it doesn't matter what I prove. For example, I believe there was a person, Aftershock, tell me if I'm wrong. The person goes by the name In Pursuit of Knowledge, right? And this person kept on me, wanted to talk to me. Comes on, he goes, how can we hold you accountable, Rob? How can we hold you accountable? Put your money where your mouth is. Let's have a bet. I'm like, I don't bet. Regardless of what you think about me, I'm confident in the things I say. I really am. But no one can 100% predict the future, and I'm not going to jeopardize my money, which is my family's money and my son's money. I'm not going to jeopardize that on online bets and shit like that. But he's like, parroting the Destiny line, we have to hold you accountable some way. I'm like, well, there's plenty of ways to hold me accountable. How do we hold you accountable? Does anyone remember what he wanted, what my claim was that he wanted to hold me accountable of? Does anyone remember what the claim was? Aftershock or Biking, anyone remember what In Pursuit of Knowledge's claim was? Or what my claim was that In Pursuit of Knowledge said, let's make a bet. How do we hold you accountable? I remember quite vividly what the claim was. I said, this was what I was setting up before he interrupted me and wanted to come on and speak about it. I said, we will eventually see that people like Hunter and Jim Biden, Joe Biden's brother, gave him money. Because the excuse right now is, okay, they're trading off the Biden family name. And it might be that his son and his brother are getting money, and it might even be illegal. But there's no proof that Joe Biden got any of the money. And I said, well, that's absurd, right? Like, eventually what we'll find is Hunter Biden got a bunch of money, Jim Biden got a bunch of money, and then Hunter Biden or Jim Biden gave a bunch of money to Joe Biden. And when that happens, what they'll say is, but that's not proof that that was the money they got from those corrupt organizations. That's not proof. Maybe they just like to give Joe Biden hundreds of thousands of dollars. Maybe that was separate. That's what was going on. And I said, that's what they'll say. It won't be enough to say Biden didn't get money. Unless there's an affidavit from these fucking places. My name is Zolchevsky. And here I am signing a notarized statement next to Joe Biden, who's also signing it with 5 cameras on saying, yes, we are engaged in a corrupt scheme, blah, blah, blah. Unless that happens, they'll never accept it. Never. That's what I said will happen. And this guy said, put your money where your mouth is. Put your money where your mouth is. Bullshit. You claimed that, well, and what was the claim that he was saying, put your money? That the Biden, will find out that the Bidens gave large sums of money to Joe Biden. That I don't know if I said Jim specifically, but I was talking about Jim and Hunter Biden. We'll eventually find out that there's a money trail from them to Joe Biden. Would it take less than a month? Then we found it. There it is. You think In Pursuit of Knowledge was messaging me on Twitter like, shit, you were right. How do you hold me accountable, In Pursuit of Knowledge? Well, it turns out I was right. He even said, when do you want to put an end date on it? 2026, 2027? Well, let's see. It took a month. Does he give a shit? Nope. He did exactly what I said they would do. Well, that's no proof of anything. And that's what Peace goes, that's no proof of anything. Brothers give brothers money. It was paying back a loan. Really, can we see the loan paperwork? What was the loan for? When did Biden get the money to give a $200,000 loan to his brother? What were the terms of that loan? When was it issued? Can we see that? No, we don't need to see any of that. We just know it was a loan. That's good enough. And it just so happened to coincide with payments that were coming from these corrupt foreign institutions. And Pisco was right there. But Rob, he's on the chat. Come on, Rob, you're sounding unreasonable. You're sounding unreasonable here. And the reason that I was saying that that person, In Pursuit of Knowledge, was inaccurately claiming what I said was because I knew how they would fucking weasel out. My claim was quite simple. Now, is this 100% proof that Joe Biden's corrupt and took money from these places? No. But what I said was it was unnecessary in the first place for Biden to have received any money because it is a thing of value for your family to be enriched. For example, I could get elected to Congress and become corrupt to make millions of dollars for my wife and son and brother and never see one dime of money myself because of that. That wouldn't prove I wasn't corrupt. You wouldn't say, well, unless you could prove money going into Rob's bank account, then there's no corruption here. That is absurd. And I've made that point quite clearly. But I said even their threshold of, okay, this all looks really bad, but until we see money going to Joe Biden, we're not going to accept anything bad happen. I said even once we see money coming from those same Biden family members to Joe Biden, they'll still say no big deal, which is exactly what they're saying. Which I knew. That's why I said, if you're going to say, how do we hold Rob accountable, you better fucking be honest about what I said. And that's what I said, and that's what's right. That money, we have found out that money went there. And we have found out that none of the people on the left that were saying we need to have money going to Biden as proof are now saying, oh shit, that is money to Biden. Maybe I'm taking this more seriously. They're all saying that's different. That doesn't count. But go back to the fire alarm thing. That's how they all are. They don't give a fuck. They're bad faith sacks of shit. All of them. Okay, I can't say all. 95% of them. They'll fucking plead. Oh, you pulled the fire alarm. You can never pull a fire alarm. You see, there wouldn't be a delay. By the way, if we had any sort of mainstream let me ask you this. What's the first question you would ask? If I was a member of the media, the first question I would ask Congress people when that fire alarm got pulled and that vote was going on was, did it delay the vote? That's the first question I would have asked. I would have interviewed Republicans, Democrats, all of them. McCarthy, Jeffries. I would have interviewed everyone and been like, well, what was the process? What happened in the room with you all? Did the vote stop in any way whatsoever? Were you guys? Now, all that was reported was they weren't evacuated. The only claim I could hear of anyone talking about what happened in the vote was from Marjorie Taylor Greene, who claimed that they basically were taken out of the room and then ushered in one by one, which caused a significant delay that is not the normal process of how they do these sorts of votes. In other words, it caused a delay. But Pisco's big claim was these two buildings that are literally connected through a tunnel that is fucking the most secure buildings in the country, those in the Capitol, that pulling the fire alarm in an adjacent building that's connected via a tunnel would not cause any sort of delays in the separate building, which is nonsensical. Not only is that nonsensical, as I explained, that I've literally seen that situation in my rural town with a hospital where the connected building's alarm went off and it caused a pause in the building we were in where they asked us to temporarily go outside to make sure that there wasn't a building fire. But it certainly would be the case in D.C., where you're worried about things like terror attacks on the seat of our government. Fuck, especially if you're the left, you think January 6th was an insurrection. So given that, you don't think that that would cause security to have a sense of alarm, to be like, wait a minute, there is something that warranted an alarm going off in the adjacent building. We're going to proceed business as usual. Now, everyone with half a fucking brain knows that there is a significant potential that that causes some sort of delay. Doesn't mean it caused a 5-day delay or a 24-hour delay or even a 2-hour delay. But that's not what the law says. The law says that intentionally causing a delay in governmental procedures, which even if it was just a 5 to 10 minute delay, would be a crime, which is a felony. But Peace goes like, that's not possible. That is outside the realm of possibility that could be what he was thinking. And although it seems ridiculous to think he said, locked door, I believe I'll pull this fire alarm on the wall to open that locked door, and then immediately sprinted away and then walked calmly and didn't tell anyone, right? He says that's more likely. And then he has to later adopt his position to the position I had, to his audience that are fucking bad faith and stupid, that'll be willing to gulp it up. So, just an example of what you deal with when you argue with these bad faith people on the left. This is who they are. They don't give a shit. And they might be likable. They might be your neighbors. I've watched Pisco celebrate every single person that's been attacked through lawfare that was connected to Trump or January 6th. From the bottom of my, you can clip this, you can send it to Pisco. I'll tell this to Pisco Says. Pisco's a lawyer. He seems like the type of person I could be friends with, right? From the bottom of my heart, I mean this. I hope that Pisco's law firm, wherever he ends up with, ends up working on some sort of political campaign, and Pisco spends time in prison. Because as a lawyer, he advocated for the best defense that he thought he could have for his clients. And that is considered politically inappropriate, and he has to face these lawfare problems. That's what he deserves. As a lawyer, you think that you would be like, maybe, mass rounding up all the lawyers connected to Trump's a really fucking bad idea. Maybe piercing attorney-client privilege is a really bad idea. You think that's what he would think. Just like you would think his commentators, people like Vosh and them, wouldn't celebrate Alex Jones having to pay $1 billion for misinformation. Because eventually, God willing, people that don't like Vosh would get in the levers of power and would go after him. Or Destiny, or whoever. But no, as long as it's being used against their opponents, good enough for them. Okay. My conscience is clean. I'm not cheering for the locking up of people I disagree with, lawyers, or people that protested, the pussy hat wearing people that protested Kavanaugh. I thought it was fine that some of them received fines, and so I thought that was fine. But this is a group of people, Pisco and the left, and these Democrats that think that their political opposition are insurrectionists that should be imprisoned. I only wish the golden rule on them. The same principles that they wish on others be used against themselves. Same with all these college students. What do you mean I can't get a job because I supported Hamas's terrorist attack? What about free speech? Fuck you. Don't look to me for help. We told you. We told you. I fought for years. People like Aftershock were more right than me. I said, no, we should engage in cancel culture. I still don't believe we should. I'm not personally doing it. But I'm no longer going to step up to the plate. They will not. I thought that cooler heads would prevail. That the tension would be ratcheted down. That people would say, you know what, maybe we should allow competing voices on campuses. Maybe we shouldn't cancel people because we don't like them politically because they had a cruel joke or a vulgar joke in their yearbook when they were 13 years old. Maybe we shouldn't do that. That's not what the left said. I said cooler heads will prevail. I was wrong. And so now it's obvious it won't stop until the same treatment is offered to them. The corruption at institutions like the FBI won't stop until they are criminally prosecuted. The Democrats weaponizing these institutions won't stop until they are victims of the very institutions that they weaponize. It's not going to stop. They don't care. You can't talk rationally to them. They think that it is a religion. They think that they are moral people and you are morally inferior and the ends always justify the means. They don't give a fuck. So you can't rationalize with them. You can't say, but you shouldn't cheer this on. You shouldn't cheer going after, even if you think Trump committed crimes and he should be investigated, okay. You shouldn't be cheering on going after like every one of his lawyers and throwing the book at all of these people that weren't accused of violence on January 6th. You should be very weary of that. They're like, nah, it's good, it's great. Their insurrection is fantastic. Okay. Okay? There's no more rationalizing with them. None. You'll try and they'll try to tell you, no, pulling a fire alarm's to open a door. Martha's Vineyard, one of the wealthiest communities in the country, they couldn't support 50 people for more than 48 hours. They don't have the resources. That's what they'll tell you. With straight face, that's what they'll tell you. What's the discussion to be had? What's the point of it? It's the same shit. History is rife with people that cheered for authoritarianism, and then it came back to bite them in the ass. Go check out the Bolsheviks. And that's what's coming. And I say this all the time. It is petty. It is shitty. It is not the greatest way to live your life, but I don't care. I'm human. And I'm here to tell you right now, it comforts me to know that the most vocal against me and against the idealism that I express of non-authoritarianism, of not locking up people for political disagreements, of not weaponizing our institutions, of having a government that is for the people, not a government that's designed to treat the people like cattle. That those people that most go against me, that are the most vocal that I interact with, when they get the system that they want, will be the ones that are fucked the most. Just like the people that want to defund the police are the people that are fucked the most once they're actually defunded. Just like the people that were for the weaponization of the cultural Marxism and attack white people because they're evil and they're colonizers are now fucked if they happen to be Jewish because, the monster we created wants to come after us because we're Jewish. Sorry. Whoops. You did it. Deal with it. That's why you won't see... I am sure there are great people in fucking New York right now, New York City. I'm sure they're great people. In fact, I know it. I absolutely know it. And many of those great people might disagree with me politically. Absolutely fine. No problem. Doesn't mean they're not great people. Great Americans, great people, moral people. Totally concede all of that. And yet I will be crying no tears for what goes through with the illegal immigrants overrunning there, or radical Islamic beliefs that are overrunning there, or crime that's running rampant. You got what you wanted. You got what you wanted. That's it. I don't know what else to say. You thought chickens won't come home to roost. It'll be directed at people we don't like. Illegal immigration won't be in my backyard. Remember, the best example is that guy that was the NBA reporter that's laughing about Black Lives Matter when the riots are going on, the George Floyd riots. Oh, yeah, this is what racial justice looks like. And then the next day he's like, they're outside my gated community. This is wrong. Okay. I feel like if I was the fireman, I'd have taken a little time getting to that house. This is what you wanted, dude. You cheered it on when it was the neighbor's house. But once it was yours, oh boy, now it's different. Yeah, get these animals out of here. That's what he said. So it's okay. And I understand what's the word I'm looking for? The dopamine hit that it must give to win all of the time must be amazing. I would know I'm a fucking loser. I happen to have political and cultural beliefs that lose over and over and over, that has almost zero representation. I keep plugging away. I like being an underdog. I'd like to know what it feels like to not be the underdog once. That'd be nice. I keep fighting for a fucking political party that puts people like Dr. Oz up. I keep doing work for someone like Scott Pressler, who's doing more work on the ground that the fucking GOP refuses to even get in the phone and talk to him. I work with people that are like, well, if it's not my guy, if it's not DeSantis, we're not going to vote for Trump, so let it be Biden or Newsom again. I don't know what it's like to be a winner. Even when my guy wins in a Hail Mary toss that Trump won in 2016, he dropped the fucking ball royally, didn't he? It must be nice. It must be nice to be Pisco today and be like, yeah, I'm covering up the fact that Jabal Momin clearly pulled this in an attempt to cause a delay. And now I could say, but Rob, look, there was an investigation, and the investigation said that wasn't the case, that it was just a simple misdemeanor. So I win again. I'm right. The cops agreed with me. Yeah, it must be nice. It must be nice to always say the experts agree with me. They're not experts. The only thing they're experts on is being corrupt. Pushing through the same values that are pro-establishment that they've always been pushing. That's the only thing they're expert on. Must be great. Must be great knowing that because I'm on the right side, that the prescriptions I offer against the wrong side will never be used on me. So Jabal Moment could pull that fire alarm. It's like, fuck it. Nothing will happen to me. He fucking knew it. You knew it. I knew it. The Democrats knew it. Kevin McCarthy knew it. We all knew. Was there any shadow of a doubt whatsoever that they were going to 1/10 do to Bowman what they did to people that delayed official proceedings on January 6th? Is there any chance whatsoever that the pro-Hamas Palestinian people that just broke into Congress there last week will be treated even remotely similar to the January 6th people? In every way, it will be treated significantly less harsh. It'll be treated significantly less harsh in how law enforcement stopped them at the moment, the amount of violence they used, how they will be treated once they are detained, how they will be, what their bail will be set, what their charges will be, and what their convictions will be, how the judges will treat them, how a jury of their peers that will be in a left-wing area like DC will treat them, how lawyers and nonprofit groups will be willing to speak up for them and defend their rights to free speech. On every possible level, legally and culturally, the treatment of these people will be significantly night and day different than the January 6 people. Every single person knows it. We know that the treatment of Biden and his family will be completely inverse by the FBI and investigators as the treatment of Trump and his family. Everyone knows it. We all know it. You know it. I know it. Biden knows it. Trump knows it. The FBI knows it. Pelosi knows it. McCarthy knows it. McConnell knows. We all know. We all fucking know. Everybody knows. And yet still, they'll point to it and say, see, the police agreed with me. They agreed with me, so I was right. You see? See, Bowman clearly didn't intend to delay because the police investigated and didn't think Bowman intended to delay. Well, really, what was the investigation? Did they look at his messages? Did they look at his telegram? Did they raid his lawyer's house? Did they demand people he was in communication with, records be subpoenaed? You know, shit that they did with Trump. January 6 people. Nah, they didn't need to do any of that. See, the threshold for that's really high. Really, that's what they did to Trump. Nah. We had FISA warrants against Trump that were unlawful, illegal. Now we have people in the Biden administration that are credibly accused of working with Iran. FISA warrants? We'd spy on Biden's team? Nah, that's different. We all know it. So stop pretending when they point to what the experts say. The experts agree with us. The experts say there's no real difference between men and women. There's no biological difference. Well, then fuck the experts. The experts say that you have to lock down if you have a factory job to feed your family because of COVID, but you can go to the Black Lives Matter rally. That's what the experts say. Well, then fuck the experts. Fuck them. They're full of shit. They're not experts. They're expert bullshitters. They're expert grifters. They're expert politicians. That's how I feel. So I'm going to let you go. I'm going to go hang out with my wonderful family. Apparently I'll be back at 11. I'll be honest. I didn't know this was an every week thing. I thought John just wanted me to do one space, but I'm cool with it. So you should be able to find me. John said 10 a.m. That's because he's bullshit Central Time. It'll be 11 a.m. for all you great people, Eastern Time, tomorrow morning. Family's doing very good. So 11 a.m. tomorrow morning, you can catch me on a Twitter space unless I have some obligation I'm unaware of with my wife. But I think we will. Fuck you, Central people. Fuck them. But also, my friend in real life actually edited from my last live stream about 10 minutes worth of stuff, put captions on it and stuff. So I'm going to try to put that up on Twitter and maybe YouTube, probably Rumble, because I think I said some things that are maybe a little harsh. But follow me on Twitter, Rumble, YouTube, and we'll try to get that up here today if I have time. But it'd be a shame not to get it up. I think it was good. I was a little heated. I don't know if you could tell. I'm getting a little fucking pissed off when it comes to these people. Pissed off here. Very happy in my home life, other than this bullshit situation I had to deal with this week. But very happy. This is cathartic to me. So enjoy watching all those fucking lefties get the world that they wanted. I'm sure they'll sign up for the draft. They'll be the first ones on the ground in the Middle East, right? It'll be them. So, all right. Thank you all so much. We'll talk soon. Let's see if I could raid someone, I guess. Be polite to do so for my Twitch audience. Who's on today? Oh, my brother. Let's raid him. Good guy. He streams video games. He doesn't talk much politics. And I think he's doing like horror games. Like one of my favorite little Norm Macdonald jokes. If we're really serious as a country about fighting the war on terror, I think a great place to start would be the nation's horror houses. That's good. So yeah, I think he's playing like some Halloween themed games. So, all right, thank you so much. Join me again tomorrow. I should be here around 11 a.m. Eastern. Thanks so much, and as always, have a good one.
Hey, what's up? Playing some Zombie Army 4.
With 18 viewers.
Let's say I wanted to play the new Dead Space remake today. That was the plan. But you need the new Xbox.